Title: Shadows Within, a manual for understanding and countering personality-based infiltration and institutional manipulation. Preface: this manual provides a structured, practical examination of how operatives exploit human personality traits to infiltrate institutions and cause internal damage. It draws directly from established psychological models, declassified intelligence frameworks, and documented case patterns to outline the mechanisms of manipulation, recruitment, and sustained influence. The core premise is straightforward. Institutions are defended by systems, policies, and technology, yet the most reliable path to compromise remains the human insider. Operatives, state intelligence officers, corporate saboteurs, ideological actors, or hybrid threat entities do not rely solely on coercion or chance. They apply deliberate psychological profiling and influence techniques to identify susceptible individuals, build access, and convert them into vectors for espionage, sabotage, leaks, policy distortion, or cultural erosion. Traditional explanations of betrayal center on the MICE framework: money, ideology, compromise, coercion, blackmail, and ego, validation, excitement, resentment. While MICE identifies surface-level motivators, it often proves insufficient for long-term agent handling or modern recruitment in low-coercion environments. Research from intelligence practitioners, including analyses published in Studies in Intelligence, has shifted emphasis to a more nuanced model: RESCLS, reciprocation, authority, scarcity, commitment and consistency, liking, social proof. These principles, rooted in Robert Cialdini's empirical work on persuasion, explain how operatives secure voluntary, enduring commitment rather than fragile compliance born of fear or greed alone. This manual treats these frameworks as operational tools. It explains how personality dimensions, Big Five traits, Dark Triad tetrad characteristics such as narcissism, Machiavellianism, psychopathy and sadism, plus entitlement, thrill-seeking and chronic disgruntlement, serve as indicators for targeting. Step-by-step mechanics of the recruitment cycle: spotting, assessment, development, pitch, handling and maintenance. Techniques for rapport building, escalation of commitment, cognitive exploitation, gaslighting, love bombing, urgency and digital augmentation, profiling via open-source data, AI-assisted targeting. Real patterns from historical and contemporary cases, used here not for sensationalism, but to illustrate repeatable methods and failure modes. Countermeasures focused on behavioral indicators, organizational hygiene, addressing disenchantment, training to recognize influence triggers, and resilience building at individual and institutional levels. The content is organized for utility. Part I establishes the psychological foundations and vulnerability profiles. Part II details the operative's toolkit and influence mechanics. Part III examines documented applications through case patterns across espionage, corporate, media, academic, and hybrid domains. Part IV presents defensive strategies and forward-looking considerations, including emerging AI-enabled threats. Readers, security professionals, counterintelligence officers, corporate risk managers, organizational leaders, psychologists, or analysts will find checklists, comparison tables, e.g., MICE versus RESCLS, red flag indicators, and procedural recommendations integrated throughout. Appendices include quick reference summaries and behavioral observation guides. This is not an academic treatise nor a narrative history. It is a manual designed for application, to equip those responsible for protecting institutions with the knowledge to detect, disrupt, and prevent personality-driven infiltration before damage cascades. Understanding these dynamics is the first and most critical layer of defense. No technical control can substitute for awareness of how human nature is weaponized from within. The patterns described are drawn from public domain sources, declassified materials, psychological research, and verified case studies. They reflect enduring realities of human motivation and influence, updated for contemporary operational environments. Use this manual to recognize the signs, interrupt the cycle, and strengthen the human element that remains every institution's greatest strength and its most persistent vulnerability. Introduction: the human factor, how operatives turn people into weapons against their own institutions. Institutions, whether government agencies, corporations, research laboratories, military units, media organizations, academic departments, or non-profit entities, build elaborate defenses, classification systems, access controls, encryption, audits, background investigations, non-disclosure agreements, and behavioral monitoring. Yet these safeguards routinely fail when the compromise originates from within. The reason is simple and unchanging: people remain the decisive element. Operatives exploit this reality by turning trusted insiders into instruments of damage, not through brute force or technical wizardry alone, but through precise, psychology-driven manipulation of personality traits, motivations, and social dynamics. This manual examines that process systematically. It treats infiltration not as random betrayal, but as a repeatable operational methodology. Operatives profile targets using observable indicators of personality vulnerability, apply structured influence techniques to develop access, secure commitment, and maintain control, then direct the insider to extract value, secrets, sabotage, policy distortion, reputational harm, or cascading institutional erosion. The outcome is often disproportionate. One compromised individual can undermine years of institutional effort, expose sources, bankrupt companies, shift national policies, or enable foreign advantage. The enduring reality of insider compromise. Historical and contemporary records demonstrate that insider threats account for a significant proportion of serious breaches across domains. Espionage cases routinely involve long-term insiders who pass classified material for years before detection. Corporate economic espionage frequently features employees who exfiltrate intellectual property upon departure or during employment. In government and defense, disgruntled or ideologically aligned personnel have leaked sensitive data with strategic consequences. Recent patterns, 2020-2025, include corporate placement operations, e.g., competitor firms allegedly inserting operatives to steal trade secrets, state-sponsored recruitment of engineers and scientists via talent programs, and hybrid threats where insiders facilitate cyber access or sabotage. These incidents highlight a consistent pattern. The damage pathway begins with human vulnerability, not external penetration. The psychology underpinning these events draws from established models. Personality traits provide the initial filter for targeting. The Big Five dimensions offer baseline indicators. Low conscientiousness correlates with poor impulse control and rule breaking. High neuroticism increases susceptibility to stress, resentment, or coercion under pressure. Low agreeableness aligns with interpersonal exploitation. More predictive for malicious intent are the Dark Triad and extended Dark Tetrad traits. Machiavellianism, strategic manipulation, viewing others as means to ends. Narcissism, entitlement, need for admiration, sensitivity to perceived slights. Psychopathy, impulsivity, lack of empathy, thrill-seeking without remorse. Sadism in some extensions, enjoyment of causing harm. Research on insider threats consistently links these traits to malicious behavior, including sabotage, theft, and espionage. Combined with situational factors, financial distress, organizational disenchantment, perceived inequity, broken promises, bullying, ideological alignment, or personal crises, they create fertile ground for recruitment. From mice to RASCLS, evolution of exploitation frameworks. For decades, intelligence practitioners used the mice mnemonic to categorize motivations for betrayal. Money, financial gain, or relief from debt. Ideology, belief in a cause or opposition to the institution's values. Compromise/coercion, blackmail, threats, or entrapment, e.g., honey traps. Ego, validation, excitement, revenge against perceived mistreatment. Mice provides a useful starting point for spotting surface-level drivers and remains relevant in high-coercion scenarios. However, declassified analyses, including a seminal 2013 article in Studies in Intelligence by Randy Burkett, critique mice for oversimplifying human motivation, focusing excessively on vulnerabilities and weaknesses, and proving less effective for voluntary, long-term commitment. Mice often leads handlers to view assets negatively, as greedy ideological fanatics, or compromised cowards, rather than as complex individuals capable of sustained productivity. In response, modern frameworks incorporate advances in social psychology, particularly Robert Cialdini's 6 Principles of Influence, From Influence, The Psychology of Persuasion, adapted for intelligence recruitment as RESCLS. Reciprocation, creating obligation through favors, information sharing, or small gifts. Authority, projecting expertise, prestige, or institutional backing to build trust. Scarcity, emphasizing unique opportunities or time-limited access. Commitment and consistency, securing small initial agreements that escalate via self-perception alignment. Liking, building rapport through similarity, flattery, shared interests, and genuine seeming friendship. Social proof, demonstrating that others, peers, admired figures, have taken similar actions. RESCLS shifts the emphasis from exploiting flaws to engineering voluntary buy-in. It explains why many modern recruitments succeed without overt coercion. The target perceives the act as consistent with their self-image, socially validated, and mutually beneficial. Successful operatives apply these principles intuitively or deliberately throughout the recruitment cycle, turning initial contact into enduring access. The operational cycle, turning vulnerability into weaponization. The process follows a structured sequence, observable across espionage, corporate sabotage, and hybrid influence operations. 1. Spotting and profiling, identifying access, position, clearances, and personality indicators via open-source data, workplace behavior, social media, or casual interactions. 2. Assessment and development, building rapport, testing susceptibility, small favors, ideological probes, and mapping motivations. 3. Pitch and recruitment, framing the act in RESCLS terms, reciprocation for past help, alignment with admired authority, scarcity of the opportunity, consistency with prior commitments, liking for the handler, proof from similar actors. 4. Handling and maintenance, sustaining motivation through ongoing influence, stress management, evasion guidance and reward. 5. Tasking and extraction, directing damage, document exfiltration, policy influence, sabotage or intelligence provision. 6. Termination or escalation, ending contact when risk rises or expanding to networks. This cycle exploits the human need for consistency, belonging and meaning. A target who starts with a minor disclosure, reciprocation for a favor, finds it easier to escalate due to commitment and consistency. Over time, the insider rationalizes deeper involvement to maintain self-image. Scope and structure of this manual. Subsequent sections provide operational detail. Part I details personality models and vulnerability profiles. Part II breaks down RESCLS application and recruitment mechanics. Part III analyzes patterns from documented cases. Part IV outlines detection, prevention, and resilience strategies. Appendices include comparison tables, MICE versus RESCLS, behavioral checklists, and red flag indicators. Institutions cannot eliminate human frailty, but they can reduce exploitability through awareness. This manual equips readers to recognize the patterns, interrupt the cycle early, and reinforce the human firewall. The threat is not new, only the tools and speed have evolved. Understanding how operatives weaponize personalities is the prerequisite for effective defense. Chapter 1: Personality as the primary target. Institutions invest millions in perimeter defenses, zero-trust architectures, multi-factor authentication, and continuous monitoring. Yet the single most reliable vector for infiltration remains the human being already inside the wire. Operatives, whether state intelligence officers, corporate competitors, ideological actors, or hybrid threat networks, treat personality as the primary target because personality is the one element that cannot be patched, encrypted, or air-gapped. It is always present, always leaking signals, and always exploitable. This chapter provides the foundational diagnostic framework used by professional recruiters and handlers. It equips you, the reader responsible for protecting an institution, with the same lens operatives use, a precise, observable map of personality traits that predict susceptibility to recruitment, sustained handling, and eventual weaponization. We begin with the most empirically validated model in modern psychology, the Big Five, then move to the darker cluster of traits that dramatically accelerate betrayal, and finally examine 4 additional high-yield characteristics that appear repeatedly in real insider threat cases. The Big Five personality model ocean, and operational susceptibility. The Big Five traits: openness to experience, conscientiousness, extroversion, agreeableness, and neuroticism, were derived from decades of factoanalytic research across cultures and languages. They are measurable through short validated instruments, e.g., the NEO-PIR or even 10-item proxies used in workplace screening. Operatives rarely administer formal tests. Instead, they observe behavior, language patterns, social media activity, and workplace performance over weeks or months to estimate where an individual falls on each dimension. Openness to experience. High scorers are imaginative, intellectually curious, and receptive to new ideas. In isolation, this trait is protective. It correlates with creativity and ethical flexibility. However, in combination with other vulnerabilities, high openness becomes a gateway for ideological or exotic influence operations. Operatives frame their pitch as a new way of seeing the world, or access to knowledge the bureaucracy hides from you. Low openness, conventional, preference for routine, is more common in gatekeeper and legacy roles. These individuals are harder to recruit with abstract ideology, but easier to hook with concrete transactional offers once a financial or ego trigger appears. Conscientiousness. This is the strongest single predictor of reliable performance and loyalty. High scorers are organized, dutiful, and self-disciplined. They follow rules even when no one is watching. Low conscientiousness, impulsivity, disorganization, rule-bending, is the single most replicated correlate of insider threat behavior across CERT, CISA, and intelligence studies. Operational reality. A low conscientiousness employee who controls access, IT admin, procurement officer, compliance reviewer, will bypass protocols just this once if the handler creates even mild urgency or reciprocity. Over time, consistency bias locks them into escalating commitments. Example: several documented corporate IP theft cases involved engineers rated low in conscientiousness, who began by sharing harmless, non-classified files after a handler offered help with an overwhelming workload. Extroversion. High extroverts are outgoing, energized by social interaction, and seek stimulation. They are easier to develop because they respond quickly to rapport building and flattery. Low extroverts, introverted, reserved, are slower to engage, but once committed, are often more reliable agents because they compartmentalize better and draw less attention. Operatives therefore adjust tactics. Extroverts receive frequent lunches and social events. Introverts receive private, one-on-one deep conversations. Agreeableness. High scorers are cooperative, compassionate, and conflict-averse. They are harder to turn against their organization because betrayal feels like harming colleagues. Low agreeableness, competitive, skeptical, self-focused, is a major red flag. These individuals rationalize betrayal as they would do the same to me. In intelligence literature, low agreeableness combined with high neuroticism is the classic profile of the walk-in volunteer who offers services unsolicited. Neuroticism, emotional stability. High neuroticism, chronic worry, emotional volatility, sensitivity to stress, is the emotional accelerant. Under pressure, these individuals experience amplified resentment, fear, or desperation. Operatives exploit this through timed stressors, a fake performance review, a fabricated rumor of layoffs, or a personal crisis they help resolve. Low neuroticism, emotional stability, is protective but not absolute. Stable individuals can still be recruited via ego or ideology if the handler never triggers emotional spikes. Practical takeaway for defenders: any employee scoring in the bottom 30% on conscientiousness or top 30% on neuroticism warrants heightened but discreet observation. These two dimensions alone account for the majority of variance in insider threat models used by government and Fortune 500 security teams. The Dark Triad and Dark Tetrad, high-speed pathways to betrayal. Where the Big Five describes normal variation, the Dark Triad and its extension, the Dark Tetrad, describe subclinical personality configurations that dramatically shorten the recruitment timeline. These traits cluster together and are measurable via instruments such as the Short Dark Triad, SD3, or the Dark Tetrad scale. Narcissism. Core features: grandiosity, entitlement, need for admiration, fragile self-esteem. Narcissists believe they are special and that ordinary rules do not apply. They are exquisitely sensitive to perceived slights, being passed over for promotion, credit stolen, or publicly criticized. Exploitation path: The handler positions himself as the only person who truly recognizes the target's genius. Small ego strokes escalate to, "You deserve better than this organization." Real-world example: Aldrich Ames, the CIA officer who caused the execution of at least 10 US sources, exhibited textbook narcissism. He felt chronically underpaid and underappreciated despite his mediocre performance. Handlers from the KGB fed that narrative relentlessly until he volunteered his services. Machiavellianism core features: strategic manipulation, cynical view of human nature, willingness to deceive for personal gain. High Machiavellians plan multiple moves ahead, compartmentalize effortlessly, and feel no guilt about using people. Exploitation path: they respond to intellectual games and long-term strategic narratives. We are playing chess while they play checkers. Once recruited, they become highly productive agents because they enjoy the craft of deception. Many successful long-term corporate spies and influence agents score high here. Psychopathy primary and secondary variants core features: shallow affect, lack of remorse or empathy, impulsivity, thrill-seeking. Primary psychopaths are cold and calculated. Secondary variants are more impulsive and emotionally reactive. Exploitation path: they are attracted to the excitement and power of clandestine work itself. Risk does not deter them, it stimulates them. Robert Hanssen, the FBI agent who spied for Russia for 22 years, displayed clear psychopathic traits: sexual thrill-seeking, double life compartmentalization, and zero remorse even after arrest. He continued betraying colleagues while teaching counterintelligence courses at the FBI. Sadism, the fourth element of the Dark Triad core features: enjoyment derived from inflicting physical or psychological pain on others. Subclinical sadists do not necessarily torture. They derive satisfaction from humiliating colleagues, exposing weaknesses, or watching an institution suffer. Exploitation path: rare as a standalone driver, but when present it turns an agent into a destructive force multiplier. The handler can channel the sadistic impulse into sabotage, reputational attacks, or deliberate leaks that maximize institutional pain. Modern hybrid operations increasingly target sadistic traits in online radicalization pipelines. Operational reality: individuals scoring high on any two or more dark traits require special vetting. They can maintain cover for years, pass polygraphs more easily because guilt is absent, and cause disproportionate damage once activated. The combination of high Machiavellianism plus high psychopathy is particularly lethal because the individual both plans expertly and feels no internal break. Additional high-yield exploitable traits: beyond the formal models, 4 observable characteristics appear with striking regularity in declassified case files and insider threat databases. Entitlement distinct from clinical narcissism: entitlement is the belief that one is owed special treatment, resources, or exemptions. It manifests as chronic resentment when expectations are not met. Trigger examples: a senior engineer who believes his 20 years of service entitle him to unrestricted data access. A mid-level manager who views expense accounts as personal income. Operatives exploit this by validating the entitlement. After everything you've given them, this is only fair, and offering a way to collect what you are owed. Thrill-seeking: this is sensation-seeking decoupled from ideology or money. The individual is bored by routine and craves novelty, risk, or secret knowledge. Trigger examples: a technically brilliant but under-challenged analyst who begins exploring dark web forums out of curiosity. Handlers offer the ultimate dopamine hit, real espionage tradecraft. Many walk-ins explicitly cite the thrill in their initial contact messages. Chronic disgruntlement: cumulative resentment from perceived organizational injustices, pay inequity, broken promises, bullying, or repeated overlooked promotions. Unlike acute anger, this is a simmering, long-term state. Trigger examples: the employee who has survived multiple rounds of layoffs only to watch newcomers receive better titles. This profile responds powerfully to both mice revenge ego and RASCLS reciprocation for finally being heard. Almost every major espionage case since 1945 contains a disgruntlement component. Wounded vanity: the specific pain of public or private humiliation, being corrected in a meeting, having an idea dismissed, or losing status after a reorganization. Unlike general disgruntlement, this is ego-specific and acute. Trigger examples: a senior analyst publicly embarrassed by a younger superior. The handler who witnesses or learns of the incident can position himself as the sole source of restored dignity. Wounded vanity is one of the fastest pathways to recruitment. The emotional wound creates an immediate opening for liking and authority principles. Integration, how operatives build a composite profile. Professional recruiters do not rely on any single trait, they construct a composite score. Baseline Big Five snapshot, especially low conscientiousness plus high neuroticism. Dark trait overlay, any two or more equals high priority. Situational amplifiers, entitlement, disgruntlement, wounded vanity. Access level and opportunity. A target who is low conscientious, high neurotic, high Machiavellian, and currently experiencing wounded vanity after a missed promotion is considered a golden prospect. The recruitment cycle can be compressed from months to weeks. Defensive application checklist for Chapter 1. 1. Review annual performance evaluations for language indicating low conscientiousness or high neuroticism. 2. Flag any employee with documented history of rule bending or conflict avoidance under pressure. 3. Note sudden behavioral changes after ego injuries, public criticism, demotion, denied raise. 4. Cross-reference with access level. The more sensitive the role, the lower the tolerance for dark traits. 5. Train first-line supervisors to report, not investigate, patterns matching the above. Personality is not destiny, but it is the most reliable early warning system available. By understanding the exact dimensions operatives target, you move from reactive damage control to proactive detection. The next chapter translates these abstract traits into 12 concrete, recognizable human profiles that appear in every institution, your institution. Chapter 2: Common archetypes of vulnerability, profiles operatives target. Chapter 1 gave you the diagnostic lens, the Big Five, the Dark Triad tetrad, and the 4 amplifiers: entitlement, thrill-seeking, chronic disgruntlement, wounded vanity. This chapter translates those abstract dimensions into 12 living, breathing human profiles that appear in every institution. These are not clinical diagnoses. They are operational archetypes distilled from decades of declassified espionage files, CERT insider threat studies, CISA behavioral analytics, corporate security reports, and direct observation of recruitment cycles. Each archetype is a composite of specific trait clusters plus situational amplifiers. Operatives do not recruit personalities. They recruit recognizable people whose daily behavior broadcasts a precise combination of access, motivation, and exploitable pressure points. By learning these 12 profiles, you will spot the signals weeks or months before the first RASCLS hook is dropped. For each archetype you will find core personality signature tied to Chapter 1 models, primary trigger, operatives' preferred offer and RASCLS levers, real-world or high-fidelity, hypothetical example, behavioral red flags observable in normal workplace settings, immediate defensive actions. At the end of the chapter is a consolidated comparison table for rapid reference. 1. The overworked gatekeeper. This individual sits at the literal or figurative choke points of your institution. System administrators, compliance officers, procurement specialists, security clearance reviewers, or mid-level managers who control budgets, approvals, or physical access. Their Big Five signature is usually high conscientiousness. They are reliable and detail-oriented, paired with high neuroticism. They feel the weight of every responsibility. Conscientiousness keeps them in the role for years. Neuroticism turns the role into slow-burn exhaustion. Trigger, chronic overload that has become normalized, weekends, after-hours pages, impossible deadlines, combined with a sudden spike, new regulation, staff cuts, or personal life event. The moment they realize I am indispensable but disposable is the opening. Operatives offer relief disguised as friendship. The handler starts with small reciprocation, I know a guy who can automate that report for you, and liking, you're the only one who actually understands how this place runs. Once the target accepts help, commitment consistency locks them in. You already let me help once, now just sign this one extra approval. Example, in a documented 2022 corporate espionage case involving a defense contractor, an IT gatekeeper with 17 years tenure had been carrying the entire legacy system maintenance load after 2 colleagues retired. A foreign competitor's recruiter posed as a consultant at an industry conference. Within 6 weeks, the gatekeeper had installed a seemingly benign remote access tool that exfiltrated terabytes of design data. He later told investigators, "I just wanted one weekend without the pager." Red flags, repeated complaints about workload in meetings or emails, sudden acceptance of help from outsiders, visible fatigue markers, missed deadlines followed by overcompensation, subtle policy shortcuts justified as making things work. Defensive actions, mandate workload audits every 6 months for anyone controlling high-value access, rotate gatekeeper duties, create anonymous relief request channels that bypass direct supervisors, train gatekeepers to recognize the helpful outsider pattern as a RASCLS red flag. 2. The disillusioned idealist. High openness and high agreeableness in the Big Five, often with strong ideological commitment early in their career. They joined the organization because they believed in its mission: national security, scientific advancement, social justice, corporate innovation. Over time, bureaucratic drift, scandals, or policy shifts shatter that belief. Unlike the ethical rogue who acts, the disillusioned idealist withdraws emotionally and becomes quietly receptive to higher purpose alternatives. Trigger: a visible betrayal of core values, layoffs contradicting people-first rhetoric, a cover-up, or a mission pivot they view as corrupt. Operatives offer ideological realignment plus social proof. The handler frames the betrayal as "you're not abandoning the mission abandoned you." Authority is projected through insider contacts at think tanks or NGOs. Social proof comes from stories of others who did the right thing. Example: Ana Montes, the DIA analyst who spied for Cuba for 16 years, began as a passionate idealist. Declassified records show her disillusionment with US policy in Latin America became the sustained ideological fuel. Modern corporate parallels appear in leaked internal documents where employees in ethics and compliance roles began feeding sensitive data to activist groups after perceived greenwashing. Red flags: sudden cynicism in internal communications. This place used to stand for something. Increased engagement with external advocacy groups, emotional withdrawal from team events, subtle policy sabotage framed as moral correction. Defensive actions: conduct regular mission reaffirmation, surveys with anonymous follow-up for high-openness employees, create internal whistleblower channels that actually resolve issues rather than bury them, monitor external group affiliations for mission-critical staff. 3. The ambition sink, frustrated high achiever. High extroversion or openness, moderate to high narcissism, low agreeableness. These are the talented performers who hit an invisible ceiling, promotions blocked by politics, credit stolen, or talent pool oversaturation. Their drive does not disappear, it simply looks elsewhere. Trigger: a missed promotion, reorganization that sidelines them, or watching less qualified peers advance. Operatives offer scarcity and authority. This opportunity is rare and time-sensitive. The handler poses as a mentor with connections to fast-track environments, rival firms, startups, foreign talent programs. Ego validation is layered in. They don't appreciate what you're worth, we do. Example: multiple Chinese, 1,000 talents cases involved US researchers who felt their universities undervalued their patents. The external program offered title, funding, and recognition they had been denied domestically. The result: systematic transfer of federally funded research. Red flags: sudden LinkedIn activity targeting competitors, bitter comments about dead-end projects, requests for external speaking engagements or consulting approvals. Defensive actions: implement transparent promotion rubrics and 360-degree feedback, create internal stretch assignment tracks for high-potential staff, flag any employee who suddenly pursues outside opportunities while still holding sensitive access. 4. The disgruntled survivor. Low to moderate conscientiousness paired with high neuroticism and chronic disgruntlement amplifier. These long-term employees have endured layoffs, pay freezes, mergers, and broken promises. They survived, but they never forgave. Trigger: any new injustice layered on old wounds, another round of cuts, a new boss who ignores their institutional knowledge. Operatives offer reciprocation and ego. Small gestures, finally someone listens, create obligation. The handler validates every grievance until betrayal feels like justice. Example, Robert Hanson's 22-year betrayal was fueled by decades of perceived slights at the FBI. He felt underpaid and overlooked despite his expertise. The KGB simply agreed with him for 2 decades. Red flags, long tenure combined with repeated passive-aggressive comments, institutional memory, weaponized in meetings, sudden friendliness toward outsiders who get it. Defensive actions, exit interviews for long-tenured staff even if they stay, anonymous grievance tracking with real follow-through, pair survivors with fresh mentors to break echo chambers. 5. The entitled independence, high Machiavellianism and narcissism. Rules are for other people. They view policies as suggestions and institutional assets as resources they may use at will. Trigger any attempt to enforce boundaries, new compliance software, audit, or reporting line. Operatives offer authority and scarcity. We operate on a higher level, bureaucracy doesn't apply to visionaries like you. Example, several corporate IP theft prosecutions involved senior engineers who treated proprietary code as their personal portfolio for freelance consulting. Red flags, history of policy exceptions granted because of who they are, side projects that blur institutional lines, resentment when audited. Defensive actions, zero tolerance enforcement for high access entitled independence, mandatory annual ethics refreshers with real consequences. 6. The thrill-seeking opportunist, high psychopathy or thrill-seeking amplifier, low neuroticism. Boredom is their enemy, risk is their reward. Trigger, routine, stagnation, or a recent adrenaline dip, successful project completed. Operatives offer pure excitement and scarcity. This is the real game, most people never get invited. Example, some walk-in volunteers to foreign services explicitly cite the thrill of the double life in initial contacts. Red flags, excessive interest in spy novels, hacking forums, or what-if security discussions, sudden risk-taking in non-work domains. Defensive actions, channel thrill into authorized red team exercises, monitor dark web activity for high-access personnel. 7. The isolated insider, high neuroticism, low extroversion and agreeableness. Personal crises or workplace social isolation leave them craving genuine connection. Trigger, divorce, bereavement, relocation, or team exclusion. Operatives offer liking and reciprocation. The handler becomes the only person who truly sees them. Example, multiple honey trap cases begin with isolated targets who form emotional bonds before realizing the transactional nature. Red flags, withdrawal from social functions, sudden close relationship with an outsider, oversharing personal details. Defensive actions, robust employee assistance programs with proactive outreach, buddy systems for new or isolated roles. 8. The debt-drowned pragmatist, the financial hostage, low to moderate ideological commitment, transactional mindset. Medical bills, gambling, divorce, or lifestyle creep have created an inescapable financial hole. Trigger, a visible liquidity crisis, overdue notices, credit score drop, or sudden expense. Operatives offer pure mice money with minimal emotional overhead. No ideology, no drama, just numbers. Example, Aldrich Ames' initial approach was driven by credit card debt exceeding $40,000. The KGB paid cash, ideology came later if at all. Red flags, sudden lifestyle changes inconsistent with salary, requests for emergency loans or advances, visible stress around payday. Defensive actions, confidential financial counseling referrals, strict monitoring of large unexplained deposits for sensitive roles. 9. The invisible essential, the ghost in the machine. High conscientiousness, wounded vanity amplifier, critical behind-the-scenes knowledge but zero public recognition. Trigger, milestone, anniversary, birthday, project success that passes without acknowledgement. Operatives offer authority and liking. You are the real brains here, they just don't see it. Example, legacy system administrators in several ransomware cases were recruited after decades of being treated as the help desk guy. Red flags, comments like "nobody knows what I do," passive refusal of recognition when offered late. Defensive actions, mandatory recognition programs tied to tenure and impact, public acknowledgement of invisible roles. 10. The ethical rogue, the vigilante. High openness, high neuroticism, sadism, or entitlement amplifier. They see wrongdoing and decide to become the correction mechanism. Trigger, discovery of legal, ethical, or moral lapse inside the organization. Operatives offer ideology and social proof. You're not leaking, you're upholding higher standards. Example, Edward Snowden's self-justification followed this exact pattern. Red flags, sudden moral crusades in internal forums, stockpiling documents for protection. Defensive actions, strong internal ethics hotlines with independent investigation, clear whistleblower protections that work faster than external leaks. 11. The entitled legacy, the I built this personality. High narcissism and Machiavellianism. Founders, early employees, or long-term executives who equate institutional assets with personal property. Trigger, succession planning, new management, or governance tightening. Operatives offer scarcity and ego. Preserve your legacy before they erase it. Example, several startup to corporate transitions have seen founders exfiltrate IP claiming, "I created this." Red flags, resistance to knowledge transfer processes, statements like, "This company is nothing without me." Defensive actions, formal succession and IP assignment agreements from day one, golden handcuff retention with equity cliffs. 12. The complacent passenger, the path of least resistance. Low conscientiousness, low neuroticism, checked out, bored, minimal effort, not malicious, just exploitable. Trigger, any low-effort request that requires no pushback. Operatives offer minimal friction. Social engineering works because they simply do not care enough to resist. Example, the vast majority of successful phishing to insider access chains begin with complacent employees who click anyway. Red flags, repeated security policy violations with its fine attitude, same weak passwords across systems, propped open doors. Defensive actions, mandatory annual security simulations with real consequences, automation of high-risk tasks to remove human complacency. Comparison table, archetypes at a glance. Archetype Big 5/Dark Signature Primary, Mice Driver Key, RESCLS, hooks top 3 red flags, typical high-access roles. Overworked gatekeeper high C, high-N ego/money reciprocation, liking workload complaints, fatigue, shortcuts IT, procurement compliance. Disillusioned idealist high O, higher ideology authority, social proof cynicism, external advocacy policy, research ethics. Ambition sink high EO, narcissism ego scarcity, authority competitor networking, bitterness engineering, sales R&D. Disgruntled survivor high N, chronic disgruntlement ego/revenge reciprocation, liking passive aggression, long tenure plus grievances operations, admin, legacy systems. Entitled independent Machiavellianism, narcissism ego/money authority, scarcity policy exceptions, side ventures senior specialists consultants. Thrill-seeking opportunist psychopathy, thrill-seeking ego/excitement scarcity, liking risky hobbies, spy media interest analysts developers. Isolated insider high N, low E/a compromise/ego liking, reciprocation withdrawal, oversharing any solitary role. Debt-drowned pragmatist low ideological, transactional money reciprocation, cash lifestyle salary mismatch finance, procurement. Invisible essential high C, wounded vanity ego authority, liking nobody sees me, comments legacy IT maintenance. Ethical rogue high O, sadism/entitlement ideology social proof, authority moral crusades, document hoarding compliance legal. Entitled legacy narcissism, Machiavellianism ego scarcity authority, I built this resistance founders veterans. Complacent passenger low C, low N non-exploited, any low-effort hook policy violations, it's fine attitude all entry mid-level users. This table is your daily scanning tool. Print it, laminate it, give it to every manager. The archetypes are not mutually exclusive, people can display traits of 2 or 3, but one dominant profile almost always drives the vulnerability. You now possess the same targeting map used by professional operatives. The next 3 chapters will show exactly how they move from identification to full recruitment and sustained damage. Read them with the 12 faces in mind. You will begin seeing them in your own organization immediately. Chapter 3: Why People Betray, Classic and Evolving Frameworks. Chapters 1 and 2 gave you the raw material, the measurable personality dimensions, Big Five and Dark Triad Tetrad, and the 12 concrete archetypes that operatives scan for every day. Now we move from who is vulnerable to why they betray, and more importantly, how professional recruiters turn that vulnerability into sustained, productive access. For more than half a century, intelligence services worldwide taught the same shorthand: MICE. It was simple, memorable, and operationally useful in an era when most recruitments involved walk-ins or high-coercion targets. Today it remains a valuable first-pass filter, but it has been overtaken by a more powerful, empirically grounded model. That model, RESCLS, explains why some agents stay loyal for decades, while MICE-driven recruits often burn out, confess, or produce low-quality intelligence. Understanding both frameworks, their strengths, their failures, and the precise mechanisms that replace the old one, is the difference between spotting a risk and stopping the damage before it starts. This chapter is your operational bridge. You will learn how to recognize MICE triggers in real time, why those triggers alone rarely produce reliable long-term insiders, and exactly how modern operatives layer RESCLS principles on top of OR instead of MICE to create voluntary, self-reinforcing commitment. Every section ties directly back to the archetypes in Chapter 2 and the personality traits in Chapter 1, so you can map what you see in your own institution. The traditional MICE model: money, ideology, compromise, ego. MICE is an acronym that emerged from OSS and early CIA tradecraft. It categorizes the 4 primary motivations that drive someone to cross the line from loyal insider to active asset. Operatives use it as a diagnostic checklist during the spotting and assessment phase. Does this person have a pressing need in one of these 4 areas? If yes, the recruitment pitch can be tailored quickly. Money, the most straightforward and historically the most common entry point. The target faces genuine financial pressure: credit card debt, medical bills, gambling losses, child support obligations, or a lifestyle that has outrun their salary. The operative offers cash, debt relief, or a consulting arrangement that looks legitimate on paper. No ideology is required. The transaction is purely economic. Classic example: Aldrich Ames, the CIA counterintelligence officer who betrayed at least 10 US sources to the KGB. Declassified records show Ames was drowning in debt exceeding $40,000 in the mid-1980s. His first approach to the Soviets was explicitly transactional. "I need money." The KGB paid, and the relationship continued for years. In corporate settings, the debt-drowned pragmatist archetype, Chapter 2, is the modern counterpart. An engineer with mounting medical bills for a sick child is offered freelance payments that happen to require uploading proprietary schematics. The money motive requires almost no emotional buy-in, which makes it fast but fragile. Once the financial pressure eases, the agent often loses motivation. Ideology: the target believes, or comes to believe, that their institution is on the wrong side of history, morality, or national interest. The operative reframes betrayal as loyalty to a higher cause. This motive produces some of the most dedicated and long-lasting agents because it is self-sustaining. Classic example: the Cambridge Five, Philby, Burgess, Maclean, Blunt, and Cairncross. These elite British intelligence officers spied for the Soviet Union for decades, driven by fervent anti-fascist and later Marxist ideology formed in the 1930s. They did not need cash. They needed to believe they were accelerating a better world order. Anna Montes at the Defense Intelligence Agency followed the same pattern, passing classified material to Cuba for 16 years because she viewed US policy in Latin America as immoral. The disillusioned idealist and ethical rogue archetypes map directly here. Once the organization betrays its own values, ideology provides both justification and fuel. Compromise, coercion, blackmail. The target is trapped by a personal secret, sexual misconduct, financial impropriety, substance abuse, or family vulnerability. The operative creates or discovers the compromising material and offers silence in exchange for cooperation. This is the classic honey trap or dead drop of incriminating photos scenario. Strength: it can produce rapid compliance. Weakness: coerced agents are notoriously unreliable. They resent the handler, minimize their output, and often look for an exit ramp. Intelligence services have long recognized that walk-ins driven purely by compromise rarely become star performers. The isolated insider or debt-drowned pragmatist can be pushed into this category if personal crises are exploited, but the relationship is inherently unstable. Ego, excitement, validation, revenge. The target feels underappreciated, overlooked, or publicly humiliated. The operative strokes the ego, offers excitement, or validates grievances. This motive overlaps heavily with wounded vanity and narcissism from Chapter 1. Classic example, Robert Hanssen. The FBI agent spied for Russia for 22 years partly for money, but largely because he craved the thrill of the double life and the sense of superiority over colleagues who never suspected him. He even taught counterintelligence courses at the FBI while betraying them. The ambition sink, invisible essential, entitled legacy, and disgruntled survivor archetypes are ego-driven goldmines. The operative simply agrees with every complaint until betrayal feels like justice or adventure. Mice works. It still accounts for the initial approach in many cases, and every security professional should be able to spot the 4 triggers instantly. But as a standalone framework, it has critical flaws that modern operatives learned to bypass decades ago. Limitations of mice and the push-pull dynamic. The mice model was never designed to explain long-term agent productivity. It was designed to explain initial recruitment. That narrow focus creates 3 structural weaknesses. First, mice reduces complex human beings to one-dimensional vulnerabilities. As Randy Burkett noted in his seminal 2013 analysis in Studies in Intelligence, the framework often led officers to unduly focus on vulnerabilities and caused case officers to see their assets in a one-dimensional and somewhat negative light. An agent recruited purely for money is forever viewed as venal. An ideological agent is seen as a fanatic. A compromised agent is seen as weak. This negative framing damages the handler-agent relationship and reduces output. Second, mice over-relies on negative motivators, especially compromise and money. Coerced agents make poor long-term producers because resentment builds. Purely financial agents lose motivation the moment the bills are paid. Intelligence services discovered that the highest-performing agents were those who felt they had chosen the relationship, not those who had been trapped or bought. Third, mice ignores the distinction between push factors, internal pressures inside the institution, and pull factors, external lures from the operative. Push factors are the daily realities that create the archetypes in Chapter 2. Chronic overload for the overworked gatekeeper, perceived betrayal of values for the disillusioned idealist, stalled career for the ambition sink, accumulated slights for the disgruntled survivor, invisibility for the ghost in the machine. These are the organizational failures you control. Pull factors are what the operative supplies: cash, ideology, validation, excitement, or relief. Mice focuses almost exclusively on the pull while remaining blind to the push. The result? Institutions keep creating the same vulnerabilities year after year, and then wonder why the same archetypes keep getting recruited. Modern insider threat research, CISA, corporate security programs, consistently shows that push factors are present in 70–80% of cases. A 2022–2024 analysis of corporate espionage incidents found that organizational disenchantment, push, preceded the external approach, pull, in the overwhelming majority of successful recruitments. Mice taught handlers to wait for the target to become desperate. RASCLS taught them to create voluntary commitment before desperation ever appeared. In short, mice is excellent for triage and rapid assessment. It is inadequate for building reliable, long-term access in an era when most recruitments occur without overt coercion, and when agents must produce high-volume intelligence for years. Evolution to RASCLS: reciprocation, authority, scarcity, commitment, consistency, liking, social proof. By the early 2000s, forward-leaning intelligence services began integrating the empirical work of social psychologist Robert Cialdini, Influence, The Psychology of Persuasion, 1984 and later editions. Cialdini's 6 universal principles of influence had been tested across cultures and contexts for decades. Burkett and others realized these principles explained why some agents stayed productive for decades, while mice agents often did not. The new mnemonic became RASCLS, sometimes written RASCALS in older drafts. RASCLS does not replace mice, it overlays and often supplants it. Where mice exploits weakness, RASCLS engineers voluntary alignment. Where mice creates one-time transactions, RASCLS builds escalating commitment that feels self-chosen. Successful case officers had been using these techniques intuitively for years. RASCLS simply gave them a conscious, repeatable framework. Reciprocation people feel an obligation to return favors, even small ones. The operative starts with low-cost gifts, information introductions, help with a personal problem, or even a simple lunch. The target feels compelled to give something back, usually a small piece of information. That small yes creates the first thread of obligation. Operational application. The handler learns the overworked gatekeeper is drowning in weekend server maintenance. He offers a script that automates half the work. The target feels grateful and, weeks later, repays the favor by approving an unusual access request. Reciprocation turns the debt-drowned pragmatist or invisible essential into productive assets with almost no overt pressure. Authority people defer to perceived experts, especially those with credentials, status, or insider knowledge. The operative never begs, he projects calm expertise and institutional prestige. Operational application. With the ambition sink or entitled legacy, the handler poses as a senior figure from a prestigious rival or foreign program. We've been watching your work for years. The target feels chosen by someone superior, triggering deference and willingness to share more. Authority also helps handlers manage existing agents. My service expects X by Friday carries more weight than a personal request. Scarcity people value what is rare, limited, or time-sensitive. The operative creates artificial urgency. This window closes in 2 weeks. Only a handful of people ever get this opportunity. Operational application. The thrill-seeking opportunist or ethical rogue responds powerfully. This is a once-in-a-lifetime chance to make a real difference before the policy changes. Scarcity turns hesitation into action and prevents the target from shopping the offer elsewhere. Commitment and consistency. Once people make a small public or written commitment, they feel psychological pressure to remain consistent with it. Self-image is at stake. I am not the kind of person who breaks my word. Operational application. This is the escalation engine. The handler begins with tiny deniable requests. Just confirm this public fact for me. Each yes makes the next larger ask feel consistent. By the time the target realizes what is happening, they have already betrayed in small ways for months. The complacent passenger and disillusioned idealist are especially vulnerable because early compliance feels harmless. Liking people say yes to those they like, people who are similar, who complement them, who cooperate, or who share common ground. The operative becomes a mirror. Same hobbies, same frustrations, same we're both outsiders narrative. Operational application. The isolated insider and invisible essential fall fastest. The handler invests genuine seeming time in listening, remembering details, and offering emotional support. Liking transforms the relationship from transactional to personal. Many long-term agents later describe their handler as the only person who really understood me. Social proof people look to the behavior of others, especially similar or admired others, to decide what is correct. The operative casually mentions others in your position have found this arrangement very rewarding or shows, redacted, evidence of successful peers. Operational application. The ethical rogue and disillusioned idealist respond strongly. 3 of your former colleagues at similar institutions have already taken this step. Social proof removes the sense of isolation and makes betrayal feel normal and even admirable. In practice, RASCLS is applied sequentially through the recruitment cycle. Spotting uses mice for quick triage. Development layers reciprocation and liking. The pitch combines authority, scarcity, and commitment. Handling sustains with all 6 plus ongoing ego validation. The result is agents who feel they chose the path and who continue producing even when external pressure, money, or coercion fades. Real-world illustration. Pyotr Popov, one of the CIA's most valuable Soviet sources in the 1950s, was sustained not primarily by money, but by the deep liking and authority projected by his case officer George Kaisfolter. Burkitt cites this case explicitly. Popov spied because his handler reminded him of his beloved father and treated him with genuine respect. Classic liking and authority layered on top of initial ideological sympathy. Modern corporate parallels abound. A senior engineer ambition sink is first helped with a patent filing reciprocation. then told the rival firm's CTO personally requested him, authority plus scarcity, then asked for just one sample to prove his expertise commitment, and finally shown testimonials from other engineers who made the jump, social proof. By the time sensitive files are requested, the engineer feels he is simply being consistent with choices he already made. Defensive application, using both frameworks together. You do not discard mice, you use it for rapid triage and then watch for RASCLS escalation. In your institution. 1. Train managers to log mice triggers in performance reviews, financial stress language, ideological complaints, personal crises, ego injuries. 2. Teach RASCLS red flags, sudden helpful outsiders, unexplained urgency, small policy exceptions that grow new mentor relationships or references to others doing the same. 3. Run annual scenario training. If this archetype receives a small favor from an outsider, what RASCLS principle is likely being applied next? 4. Create internal alternatives. Genuine recognition programs counter liking and authority, transparent promotion tracks counter scarcity and ego, confidential financial support counter money, and mission reaffirmation forums counter ideology and social proof. The old mice world assumed betrayal was rare and driven by weakness. The RASCLS world recognizes betrayal is engineered through universal human psychology, and therefore preventable through awareness. Operatives no longer wait for desperation, they manufacture voluntary commitment. Your job is to interrupt that manufacturing process at the earliest possible stage. When you combine the personality diagnostics of Chapter 1, the 12 archetypes of Chapter 2, and the dual frameworks of this chapter, you possess the same targeting and counter-targeting map used by the most sophisticated services and threat actors in the world. The next chapters will show exactly how that map is turned into a step-by-step recruitment cycle and how you can break every link in it. Chapter 4 From Coercion to Persuasion, Applying RASCLS in Practice. Chapters 1 through 3 equipped you with the diagnostic foundation, the personality dimensions that mark targets, the 12 concrete archetypes that appear in every institution, and the dual frameworks, mice for triage and RASCLS for sustained manipulation. This chapter moves from theory to operational mechanics. It shows exactly how professional operatives, state intelligence officers, corporate saboteurs, ideological networks, or hybrid threat actors translate the 6 RASCLS principles into daily practice. The shift from mice to RASCLS is not cosmetic. Mice relies on coercion or raw need, money, blackmail, ideology under duress. RASCLS engineers voluntary commitment. The target does not feel trapped or bought. They feel they have chosen the path, that the relationship is mutual, and that continuing is simply consistent with who they now see themselves to be. This voluntary quality is why RASCLS recruited agents often remain productive for decades, pass polygraphs more reliably, and produce higher volume, higher quality damage. Each principle is explained below with its psychological mechanism, precise operational application, linkage to specific archetypes from Chapter 2, real or high-fidelity composite examples, and immediate defensive indicators you can teach your teams. After the individual breakdowns, we examine how the 6 principles work together as a sequential system to create long-term, self-reinforcing insiders. Reciprocation, creating unpaid debt through small favors. The principle is ancient and universal. When someone gives you something, even unsolicited, you feel a powerful psychological obligation to repay. Operatives exploit this by starting with favors that cost them almost nothing but feel significant to the target. Operational application. The handler identifies an immediate pain point, usually tied to an archetype's trigger, and removes it. No pitch yet, just help. The target's brain registers an imbalance that must be corrected. The first repayment is almost always a small piece of information or a minor policy bypass. Each subsequent repayment escalates naturally because the debt keeps growing. Link to archetypes. Overworked gatekeeper automation script for weekend duties. Invisible essential introduction to someone who finally sees their work. Debt-drowned pragmatist. Quiet referral to a low-interest bridge loan. Isolated insider listening ear during a personal crisis. Example, a mid-level procurement officer, classic overworked gatekeeper, is buried under new compliance paperwork after a staff cut. At an industry conference, a fellow procurement professional, offers a free template spreadsheet that cuts the workload by 60%. The officer uses it, feels immense relief, and 3 weeks later repays by approving an unusual vendor invoice that happens to contain embedded malware. 6 months later, the same officer is routing sensitive contract data because, after everything you've done for me, this is only fair. The handler never asked for classified material first. Reciprocation made the target volunteer it. Defensive indicators, sudden acceptance of help from outsiders, unexplained improvements in an employee's workload or mood after meeting a new contact, language like "I owe them one" or "they really came through for me." Authority, projecting expertise and prestige. People are wired to defer to perceived experts, especially those with credentials, status symbols, or insider knowledge. Operatives never beg or plead. They position themselves as the calm, superior authority the target has been missing. Operational application. The handler curates an image, business cards from prestigious firms, subtle references to high-level connections, calm confidence in technical discussions. With high-access targets, authority is layered with scarcity. My principles only work with the best. Once deference is established, the operative can issue tasking that feels like guidance from a respected mentor rather than a demand. Link to archetypes, ambition sync, handler as CTO-level mentor, entitled legacy, someone who understands real visionaries, ethical rogue, an authority in ethical oversight, disillusioned idealist, a senior figure from the true mission. Example, a frustrated research scientist, ambition sync, at a pharmaceutical firm has watched 2 of her patents sidelined by internal politics. At a closed academic symposium, she meets a visiting professor from a prestigious European institute who casually mentions that his team has been following her work for years. He offers to review her latest paper off the record and provides incisive feedback that no one inside her company ever gave. Within 2 months, the scientist is sharing pre-publication data because he's the only real expert who gets it. The European Institute was a cutout for a foreign talent recruitment program. The authority projection compressed the recruitment timeline from months to weeks. Defensive indicators, employees suddenly name-dropping impressive external contacts, requests for approval to attend exclusive private meetings, deference language, "my advisor says," or "according to my mentor." Scarcity, making the opportunity feel rare and time-limited. Humans place dramatically higher value on things that are scarce, limited, or about to disappear. Operatives manufacture artificial urgency to convert hesitation into immediate action. Operational application. The handler frames the relationship or the specific request as a closing window. This opportunity only exists for the next 10 days. Very few people ever get this kind of access. Or, once the policy changes, this door closes forever. Scarcity works especially well after initial reciprocation or liking has softened resistance. Link to archetypes. Thrill-seeking opportunist, the real game is rare, ambition sink, once-in-a-career chance to break through. Ethical rogue, the window to correct this wrong is closing. Complacent passenger, low-effort requests framed as now or never. Example, a systems administrator, thrill-seeking opportunist, has grown bored with routine patching. During a late-night online gaming session, he connects with a player who turns out to be a handler. After 2 weeks of casual rapport, the handler mentions, "Look, I can only keep this channel open for another week before my principals reassign me. If you want to see how the other side actually operates, this is your shot." The administrator sends a test file, just to see. The scarcity framing turned curiosity into active participation in under 10 days. Defensive indicators, sudden urgency in external communications, must decide quickly. Employees asking for rapid approvals on unusual external requests, references to time-sensitive opportunities. Commitment and consistency, locking in escalation through small yeses. Once a person makes a public or private commitment, even a tiny one, they experience intense psychological pressure to behave consistently with it. Self-image is now at stake. I am not the kind of person who goes back on my word. Operational application. Handlers begin with deniable, low-stakes requests that require a yes. Each yes rewires the target's identity. The next request is only slightly larger, but the consistency drive makes refusal feel like self-betrayal. This principle is the engine that turns one-time favors into decades-long espionage. Link to archetypes, complacent passenger, starts with just click this link. Disillusioned idealist, just confirm this one fact. Overworked gatekeeper, you already helped once, just one more approval. Entitled independent, you already shared that. Consistency says finish the set. Example, a compliance officer, disillusioned idealist, is asked by a new industry colleague to confirm whether a certain public regulation is being followed internally. She says yes and forwards a non-sensitive memo. 2 weeks later, the request is for a slightly more sensitive policy summary to keep our records consistent. 6 months later, she is routing full audit trails because I've already been helping. Stopping now would make me look inconsistent. The same pattern appears in corporate IP theft cases, where engineers begin by sharing publicly available white papers and end by uploading entire design repositories. Defensive indicators, employees justifying larger violations by referencing earlier small ones. I already did X, so Y is no different. Growing tolerance for policy exceptions, defensive language when questioned about small deviations. Liking, becoming the only person who truly understands them. People say yes to people they like. Liking is created through perceived similarity, genuine seeming compliments, cooperative behavior, and emotional mirroring. Operatives invest heavily in becoming the target's only real friend. Operational application. The handler mirrors hobbies, frustrations, language patterns, and values. They remember small personal details and offer emotional support without asking for anything in return. At first. Over time, the target confides more because the handler feels safer than anyone inside the institution. Link to archetypes. Isolated insider, the handler becomes the sole confidant, invisible essential. Finally, someone sees my value. Disgruntled survivor, the only one who listens. Ethical rogue, someone who shares my moral outrage. Example, a lone network engineer, isolated insider, whose marriage is failing, begins receiving empathetic messages from a former colleague on a professional forum. The handler listens for weeks without ever asking for data. Eventually, the engineer volunteers system diagrams, because you're the only one who actually cares what I'm going through. The relationship lasted 4 years and resulted in the compromise of an entire corporate backbone. Defensive indicators, sudden close personal relationships with outsiders, oversharing of family or emotional details, defensive protection of the external contact. You don't understand them like I do. Social proof, demonstrating that everyone is doing it. People look to the behavior of similar others to decide what is correct, especially in ambiguous situations. Operatives provide curated evidence that people just like you have already taken the same step. Operational application, handlers casually mention or show redacted testimonials, statistics, or stories of peers. 3 other division heads in your industry have this arrangement. Social proof removes the sense of isolation and makes betrayal feel normal and even admirable. Link to archetypes, disillusioned idealist, others are already protecting the real mission. Ethical rogue, your peers at other firms have stepped up. Ambition sink, everyone who advanced did it this way. Complacent passenger, no one else worries about this. Example, a mid-level policy analyst, disillusioned idealist, receives a message. You're not alone. 4 analysts from similar agencies have already begun sharing trend data with independent watchdogs. Here are the anonymized results. The social proof converts hesitation into action. Within months, the analyst is part of a larger leak network. Defensive indicators, references to what others are doing or everyone else has this. Sudden interest in external forums or groups, requests to see how peers handle similar situations. How RASCLS builds voluntary, long-term commitment. The true power of RASCLS is not in any single principle, but in their deliberate sequencing across the entire recruitment cycle. Operatives treat the 6 principles as interlocking gears. 1. Spotting and assessment, right arrow mice triage, plus personality archetype mapping. 2. Development, right arrow heavy reciprocation plus liking to create emotional safety and debt. 3. Pitch, right arrow authority plus scarcity plus initial commitment request. 4. Escalation, right arrow consistency drive plus social proof to normalize larger asks. 5. Handling and maintenance, right arrow ongoing rotation of all 6 principles to prevent burnout. This sequence transforms a wary target into a self-motivated asset. The target begins by accepting a small favor reciprocation. They like the handler liking. They defer to the handler's expertise or authority. They agree to a tiny request because it feels scarce, scarcity plus commitment. Each subsequent action feels consistent with the person they have become, consistency. Finally, seeing that others like me are doing the same removes the last moral friction, social proof. Contrast this with pure mice. A money-driven agent stops producing when the bills are paid. A coerced agent resents the handler and minimizes output. A RASCLS-recruited agent continues because stopping would violate their own self-image, their relationship with someone they like and respect, and the social consensus they have internalized. Long-term commitment emerges because the target internalizes the identity. I am someone who helps my mentor, who is part of this important network, who makes smart strategic moves. The institution becomes the outsider. The operatives' network becomes the new in-group. This identity shift explains why many RASCLS agents remain active for 10, 20, or even 30 years, far longer than classic mice recruits. Real-world validation. Declassified CIA and FBI analyses, including Burkitt's 2013 paper and subsequent updates, show that agents developed primarily through RASCLS techniques produced 3-5 times more actionable intelligence and were far less likely to self-terminate or confess than purely mice-driven assets. Corporate insider threat programs report the same pattern. The most damaging long-term leakers were those who felt they had chosen the external relationship. Defensive application checklist for Chapter 4. Train your teams to watch for the RASCLS sequence. Not isolated incidents. Reciprocation red flag. Unexplained external help followed by small policy exceptions. Authority red flag. New mentor relationships with impressive credentials. Scarcity red flag. Sudden time-pressured requests from outsiders. Commitment red flag. Justification of larger violations by referencing smaller ones. Liking red flag. Emotional oversharing with external contacts. Social proof red flag. References to what others are doing. Create internal countermeasures that satisfy the same psychological needs. Genuine recognition programs, counter liking authority. Transparent career paths, counter scarcity. Confidential financial wellness support, counter reciprocation via money. Mission reaffirmation forums, counter social proof and ideology. And zero tolerance escalation tracking for small policy violations. RASCLS is not magic. It is applied psychology that works because it aligns with how human beings actually make decisions. Operatives mastered it decades ago. Your institution can master the counter-application today. The next chapter will show the full recruitment cycle in action, how the 6 principles are timed and layered from first contact to full weaponization. Chapter 5: The Recruitment Cycle, Step-by-Step Exploitation. You now possess the complete targeting map, the personality dimensions from Chapter 1, the 12 living archetypes from Chapter 2, the dual motivational frameworks of mice and RASCLS from Chapter 3, and the precise application of each RASCLS principle from Chapter 4. This chapter assembles those pieces into the actual operational sequence that professional operatives follow. The recruitment cycle is not random. It is a repeatable, phased process refined over decades by intelligence services, corporate espionage teams, ideological networks, and hybrid threat actors. Every successful long-term insider compromise you have read about, whether Aldrich Ames at the CIA, Robert Hansen at the FBI, Anna Montes at the DIA, or the thousands of corporate IP theft and influence cases documented by CISA and private sector threat intelligence, followed this same structure. The cycle consists of 4 distinct phases. 1. Spotting and profiling. 2. Rapport building and testing susceptibility. 3. The pitch and escalation of commitment. 4. Handling, maintenance and tasking. Each phase has clear objectives, observable indicators, preferred RASCLS levers, typical timelines and archetype-specific tactics. Operatives treat the cycle like a production line. Input a vulnerable personality, apply calibrated influence at each stage, and output a productive, self-sustaining asset. Defenders who understand the sequence can interrupt it at the earliest link. The remainder of this chapter walks you through every step with concrete examples, archetype mappings, and immediate countermeasures you can implement tomorrow. Spotting and profiling, including archetype indicators. Spotting is the reconnaissance phase. The operative's goal is to identify individuals who combine three elements: high-value access, observable personality vulnerabilities, Chapter 1, and a dominant archetype match, Chapter 2. This phase is deliberately passive and low risk. No contact is made yet. The operative uses open-source intelligence, OSINT, workplace observation, social media, conference chatter, and sometimes paid insiders or data brokers to build a shortlist. Modern spotting is faster and cheaper than ever. A single operative can profile hundreds of targets in days using LinkedIn, public court records, professional forums, conference attendee lists, and leaked employee directories. AI-assisted tools scan for linguistic markers of neuroticism, complaint-heavy posts, low conscientiousness, frequent job hopping or policy rants, or narcissism, self-promotional language. State actors add signals, intelligence, and human source tips. Corporate saboteurs use industry events and headhunter networks. Key profiling criteria operatives apply. Access filter: only individuals with direct or indirect access to high-value assets qualify. Classified systems, intellectual property repositories, financial controls, policy drafting authority, customer databases, or physical infrastructure. An isolated help desk technician with no access is ignored even if they match every archetype. Personality filter: Chapter 1 quick scan. Low conscientiousness plus high neuroticism equals highest priority. Any two Dark Triad tetrad traits, especially narcissism plus Machiavellianism. Amplifiers present: entitlement, thrill-seeking, chronic disgruntlement, wounded vanity. Archetype filter: Chapter 2. Operatives look for behavioral signatures that map to the 12 profiles. They do not need a perfect match. A dominant archetype plus one secondary trait is sufficient. Specific spotting indicators by archetype, observable without contact. Overworked gatekeeper: public complaints about workload on LinkedIn or internal Slack leaks, visible exhaustion at conferences, recent staff cuts in their department. Disillusioned idealist: posts or comments criticizing institutional mission drift, we used to stand for X, increased activity in external advocacy groups. Ambition sink: sudden surge in competitor job searches or conference speaking proposals, bitter comments about politics blocking talent. Disgruntled survivor: long tenure plus pattern of passive-aggressive emails or meeting remarks, references to surviving another round of cuts. Entitled independent: history of policy exceptions granted, side projects that blur institutional boundaries, resentment when audited. Thrill-seeking opportunist: engagement with hacking forums, spy fiction podcasts, or what-if security discussions, sudden risk-taking hobbies. Isolated insider: reduced participation in team events, personal life posts hinting at divorce, bereavement, or relocation stress. Debt-drowned pragmatist: lifestyle inflation inconsistent with salary, new car, luxury vacations, court records for debt or liens, payday stress language. Invisible essential: comments like "nobody knows what I keep running," milestone anniversaries ignored in company communications. Ethical rogue: sudden moral crusades in internal forums, stockpiling documents for protection. Entitled legacy: resistance to succession planning, public statements of "I built this place." Complacent passenger: repeated security violations with "it's fine" attitude, same weak password across multiple systems. Timeline: spotting usually takes 2-8 weeks for a single target. Operatives maintain a rolling shortlist of 10-20 prospects and prioritize based on a quick composite score: access plus personality plus archetype plus current stress level. Example of spotting in action: a foreign talent program officer scans LinkedIn for US aerospace engineers who recently missed promotions, ambition sink indicator, have high openness scores inferred from conference presentations, and show wounded vanity in comments about management not appreciating innovation. One engineer's profile lights up: 14 years at the firm, patent portfolio sidelined, recent post about being passed over again. The officer adds him to the shortlist and begins passive monitoring for 3 weeks before any contact. This exact pattern appears in multiple documented 1,000 talents cases. Defensive countermeasures for spotting phase: 1. Restrict public profiles of high-access personnel, LinkedIn privacy settings, no conference attendee lists. 2. Monitor internal sentiment via anonymous quarterly surveys focused on archetype triggers, workload, mission alignment, recognition. 3. Flag sudden external networking spikes for sensitive roles. 4. Use the comparison table from Chapter 2 as a weekly manager briefing tool. Does anyone on your team match 2 or more indicators? If spotting succeeds, the operative moves to active development. Most targets never know they were profiled. Rapport building and testing susceptibility. Once a target is shortlisted, the operative initiates contact in a low-stakes, deniable way, usually at a conference, through a shared professional group, or via a seemingly random online connection. The objective of this phase is twofold: build emotional safety and test whether the target will respond to RASCLS levers. Rapport building relies primarily on liking and reciprocation. Chapter 4. The handler mirrors the target's language, hobbies, frustrations, and values. They listen far more than they speak. Small favors begin immediately but remain trivial. A useful article, an introduction, help with a minor problem. Testing susceptibility is subtle. The operative floats low-risk probes and measures the response speed and depth. Offer a small favor and watch for reciprocation willingness. Share a mild institutional complaint and gauge agreement level. Ask for a tiny piece of publicly available information and note how quickly it is given. Introduce light scarcity. I can only share this before my next trip, and observe urgency. Successful tests accelerate the cycle. Resistance or slow response usually leads to dropping the target. Archetype-specific tactics. Overworked gatekeeper. Handler offers automation help or workload relief within the first 2 conversations. Isolated insider/invisible essential. Deep listening sessions focused on feeling unseen or lonely. Ambition sink. Subtle flattery about unrecognized talent plus hints of external opportunities. Disillusioned idealist/ethical rogue. Shared moral discussions about institutional failures. Debt-drowned pragmatist. Casual financial stress empathy without immediate cash offers. Thrill-seeking opportunist. Teasing references to the real game most people never see. Timeline 4-12 weeks. Contact frequency starts at once per week and increases based on response. Composite example: a compliance officer, disillusioned idealist, meets a fellow ethics professional at an industry webinar. Over the next 6 weeks, the handler 1. Sends a relevant white paper, reciprocation. 2. Listens to her frustrations about recent policy changes, liking. 3. Asks her to confirm 1 public regulation, for my records, small commitment test. 4. Mentions that 3 other compliance leads have started similar informal discussions, social proof test. The officer responds positively to every probe. The handler now knows the target is susceptible and moves to the pitch. Had she hesitated on the small commitment test, the handler would have slowed or disengaged. Defensive countermeasures. 1. Train all staff that any external helpful contact requires immediate reporting, even if it feels innocent. 2. Role-play RASCLS probes in annual security awareness training. 3. Monitor communication patterns, sudden increase in external emails or calls from high-access personnel. 4. Create an internal rapport radar checklist, new contacts who remember personal details too quickly or offer unsolicited help. The pitch and escalation of commitment. The pitch is the moment the relationship shifts from friendship to operational. It is never dramatic. The handler frames the request as a logical, mutually beneficial next step that aligns with everything already discussed. Core RASCLS combination at pitch. Authority plus scarcity plus initial commitment request, layered on prior reciprocation and liking. The escalation ladder is deliberate and incremental. Each successful step rewires the target's self-image via consistency. Level 1. Confirm a public or low-sensitivity fact. Level 2. Share a non-classified internal document. Level 3. Provide analysis or interpretation of data. Level 4. Exfiltrate moderately sensitive material. Level 5. Active sabotage or ongoing tasking. Most targets never realize they crossed a line until level 3 or 4. Archetype-specific pitch framing. Ambition sink. This is the fast-track opportunity you've earned. Debt-drowned pragmatist. One-time payment, no strings, just data you already see every day. Ethical rogue, you're not betraying anyone, you're correcting a wrong others are too scared to touch. Entitled legacy, preserve what you built before they erase your legacy. Complacent passenger, minimal framing, the ask is so low effort it feels like nothing. Classic real-world pitch example, Aldrich Ames' first meeting with the KGB. After initial money discussions, Mice, the handler, layered RASCLS. We value your expertise, authority. This arrangement is only available now, scarcity, and just bring the first list next time, commitment. Ames left feeling he had made a rational, self-chosen business decision. Escalation example from corporate espionage. An engineer, ambition sink, is first asked to share a public white paper, then a draft patent application, then the full proprietary design file because you already shared the outline. Each step felt consistent with the previous one. Within 9 months he was uploading entire repositories. Defensive countermeasures. 1. Zero-tolerance policy for any external request involving institutional data, no matter how small. 2. Require pre-approval for all external mentorship or consulting discussions. 3. Train managers to recognize escalation language. Just one more, you already helped, it's no big deal. 4. Implement escalation pause drills. If an employee mentions a small external favor, immediately review the entire relationship. Handling maintenance and tasking. Once the target has crossed into active cooperation, the relationship enters long-term management. The operative's goals shift: sustain motivation, manage stress, prevent detection, and maximize output. Maintenance techniques, rotating all RASCLS principles. Ongoing reciprocation, regular small payments, recognition, or personal help. Authority reinforcement, handler remains the calm expert. Scarcity reminders, this arrangement is special, few others have it. Consistency deepening, periodic reviews of past contributions, you've already done so much. Liking maintenance, continued emotional support, birthday gifts, family concern. Social proof, occasional updates on how the network is growing. Stress management is critical. Many agents experience guilt, paranoia, or burnout. Handlers are trained to spot signs and intervene, normalize the double life. Everyone feels this at first. Provide escape narratives. You can always slow down or introduce new rewards. Tasking is calibrated to the target's access and risk tolerance. Early tasks are low risk, high reward for the operative. Later tasks include dead drops, digital exfiltration, sabotage, or recruiting secondary assets. Termination planning begins on day 1. Handlers prepare cover stories, emergency exfiltration, or deliberate burnout if risk rises. Long-term example, Robert Hansen was handled for 22 years using exactly this maintenance model. The KGB alternated cash reciprocation, ego stroking, liking authority, and reminders of his unique status, scarcity social proof. Even after major FBI investigations, Hansen continued because the relationship had become core to his identity. Defensive countermeasures for handling phase. 1. Behavioral anomaly detection. Sudden mood swings, unexplained wealth, excessive secrecy, or defensive protection of external contacts. 2. Mandatory rotation of high-access personnel every 3-5 years. 3. Anonymous handler suspicion reporting channels. 4. Polygraph plus behavioral interviews focused on external relationships. Full cycle summary and defensive integration. The complete cycle typically unfolds over 18 months from first spotting to productive tasking. Some archetypes, debt-drowned pragmatist, complacent passenger, can be moved through in weeks. Others, disillusioned idealist, entitled legacy, require 6-12 months of careful cultivation for long-term commitment. You now see the entire machine. Spotting uses your own data against you, rapport exploits human loneliness and gratitude, the pitch weaponizes consistency, and handling turns the insider into a self-sustaining asset. Break the cycle at any single point, and the entire operation collapses. The most effective institutions do not wait for damage. They train every manager and security officer to recognize the 4 phases and the specific indicators at each stage. Print the following quick reference checklist and distribute it organization-wide. recruitment cycle interruption checklist spotting phase, external networking spikes plus archetype matches rapport phase, new helpful, contacts plus small favors accepted pitch phase, first requests for any internal data escalation phase, justification of larger asks by referencing smaller ones handling phase, emotional attachment to outsider plus behavioral changes. When any box is checked, trigger immediate review by security and HR, no exceptions. The next chapter will examine advanced techniques that accelerate or augment this cycle: gaslighting, love bombing, digital profiling, AI assistance, and group dynamics. But the core truth remains: every infiltration begins with the same four-phase cycle you just read. Know it cold, and you can stop most operations before the first document leaves the building. Chapter 6: Advanced Techniques, Social Engineering and Cognitive Exploitation. The four-phase recruitment cycle described in Chapter 5 is the backbone of every successful infiltration. Most operations follow it faithfully. Yet professional operatives, whether state intelligence services, corporate espionage units, ideological networks, or hybrid threat actors, routinely layer advanced social engineering and cognitive exploitation techniques on top of the cycle to accelerate timelines, deepen commitment, reduce detection risk, and amplify damage. These techniques do not replace RASCLS, they supercharge it. Gaslighting erodes the target's confidence in their own institution. Love bombing floods the target with affection that makes the handler the emotional center of their world. Urgency compresses decision windows that would otherwise allow second thoughts. Ideological framing converts rational doubt into moral certainty. Group dynamics turn a lone insider into part of a supportive we. Digital profiling and AI augmentation make the entire process faster, cheaper, and more precise than any human operator could achieve alone. Together, these tools transform a standard recruitment from a months-long courtship into a high-velocity operation that can produce usable damage in weeks. They also create psychological traps that make extraction or defection far more difficult. This chapter equips you to recognize each technique in real time, map it to the archetypes in Chapter 2, and interrupt it before it locks the target into irreversible betrayal. Gaslighting, eroding reality and institutional trust. Gaslighting is the deliberate manipulation of a target's perception of reality so they begin to doubt their own memory, judgment, or loyalty to the institution. The operative plants seeds of confusion. That policy you remember never existed. Management has been lying to you about X for years. Your colleagues are gaslighting you, not me, until the target's primary source of truth becomes the handler. Psychological mechanism. Gaslighting exploits high neuroticism and wounded vanity. Chapter 1. It creates cognitive dissonance that the brain resolves by aligning with the handler's version of events. Over time, the target's institutional loyalty is reframed as naive or delusional. Operational placement in the cycle, usually introduced during rapport building or early handling. Chapter 5. It works best on disillusioned idealist, ethical rogue, invisible essential, and disgruntled survivor archetypes, anyone already carrying latent resentment. Detailed example: a senior policy analyst disillusioned idealist at a government agency discovers a minor internal cover-up. The handler responds, "You're not crazy, I've seen the same thing in 3 other agencies. The records you're looking at were altered after the fact. Here, the metadata that proves it." The analyst checks and finds nothing. The handler then produces corrected documents that appear authentic. After 3 iterations, the analyst no longer trusts internal records or colleagues and begins routing sensitive briefings to the handler to keep them safe from the liars inside. This pattern mirrors declassified cases of ideological recruits who were slowly convinced that their own service was fabricating intelligence. Behavioral red flags. Sudden statements like, "I'm starting to think I misremembered that meeting," or "maybe the official story is wrong." Increased reliance on external verification from one specific contact. Defensive anger when institutional facts are cited. You don't understand what's really happening. Defensive countermeasures. 1. Maintain immutable audit logs for all policy and data changes. 2. Require dual source verification for any employee raising internal conspiracy concerns. 3. Train supervisors to flag rapid shifts in an employee's trust in official processes. 4. Create reality anchor briefings that proactively address common gaslighting narratives before they take root. gaslighting alone rarely recruits. Layered with RASCLS liking and authority, it becomes devastating because the handler becomes the only sane voice in the target's collapsing reality. Love bombing, flooding emotional needs to create dependency. Love bombing is an intense, early-stage barrage of affection, validation, gifts, and attention that creates rapid emotional bonding. It mirrors the honeymoon phase of abusive relationships, but is calibrated for operational speed. Psychological mechanism. It hijacks the brain's attachment system, oxytocin release, and exploits the isolated insider, invisible essential, and overworked gatekeeper archetypes, anyone starved for genuine recognition or connection. The target's unmet needs for belonging and worth are met exclusively by the handler. Operational placement, almost always in the rapport-building phase, Chapter 5, then sustained through handling. It is especially potent when combined with reciprocation and liking. Detailed example, a network administrator, isolated insider, whose spouse recently left begins receiving daily supportive messages from a professional acquaintance, met at a cybersecurity conference. The handler sends small gifts, specialized tools, books on topics the target loves, remembers every personal detail, and offers unconditional praise. "You're the most talented person I've ever worked with." Within 6 weeks, the administrator is sharing network diagrams, "because you're the only one who actually sees me." The love bombing continued for 2 years, resulting in the compromise of an entire corporate VPN infrastructure. Similar patterns appear in documented honey trap cases and corporate espionage, where targets later described their handler as the only person who ever really cared. Behavioral red flags. Sudden emotional uplift tied to one external contact. Oversharing of deeply personal details early in the relationship. Defensive protection of the new contact. "You wouldn't understand our bond." Visible mood swings when contact is delayed. Defensive countermeasures. 1. Proactive employee assistance outreach for anyone showing signs of isolation. 2. Mandatory reporting of any external relationship that involves gifts or excessive praise. 3. Pair high-access isolated roles with internal accountability buddies. 4. Train staff that rapid emotional bonding with outsiders is a classic manipulation flag. Love bombing turns the handler into an emotional lifeline. Once dependency is established, RASCLS commitment and consistency become almost automatic. Urgency, compressing decision windows to bypass rational review. Urgency is the advanced application of the scarcity principle, Chapter 4. It creates artificial time pressure so the target cannot consult colleagues, review policies, or sleep on the decision. Psychological mechanism. Under urgency, the prefrontal cortex, rational planning, is suppressed in favor of amygdala-driven fight-or-flight responses. The target defaults to the handler's framing. Operational placement, primarily at the pitch and early escalation stages, Chapter 5. It is most effective on complacent passenger, ambition sink, thrill-seeking opportunist, and debt-drowned pragmatist archetypes, anyone who already leans toward low-effort or high-reward shortcuts. Detailed example, a procurement specialist, debt-drowned pragmatist, is told, "My principals need this vendor approval by close of business today or the entire funding window collapses. I've already stuck my neck out for you, don't let me down." The specialist approves the request without the normal 2-day review. The urgent vendor invoice contained embedded malware that later exfiltrated contract data. Corporate espionage reports from 2023-2025 show this exact urgency tactic used in 40% of successful supply chain compromises. Behavioral red flags. Sudden requests for same-day approvals on unusual matters. Language from the employee like, "I have to decide right now," or "it's time-sensitive." Attempts to bypass standard review processes with emotional appeals. Defensive countermeasures. 1. Institute a mandatory 48-hour cooling-off rule for any external data request. 2. Require two-person approval for urgent matters involving high-access personnel. 3. Log and review every time-critical external interaction weekly. 4. Train that urgency is almost always manufactured. When urgency is layered on prior reciprocation, refusal feels like betraying the handler personally. Ideological framing, converting doubt into moral crusade. Ideological framing reframes the institution's mission as morally corrupt and the betrayal as a higher ethical duty. It is the advanced evolution of the mice ideology motive, Chapter 3, enhanced with RASCLS social proof and authority. Psychological mechanism. It exploits the disillusioned idealist and ethical rogue archetypes by resolving cognitive dissonance. I am not a traitor, I am a whistleblower/patriot/truth-teller. Operational placement. Late rapport through handling phases. It is often combined with gaslighting to undermine institutional narratives. Detailed example. Edward Snowden's public statements followed classic ideological framing. Handlers and later media cutouts repeatedly emphasized that the NSA's programs violated constitutional principles and that leaking was a moral imperative. The framing turned a single actor into a global symbol. In corporate settings, similar framing appears when insiders leak IP to expose unethical practices, while actually feeding data to competitors. One 2024 case involved a pharmaceutical researcher who was convinced that withholding trial data was corporate greed and began feeding results to an external activist network. Behavioral red flags. Language shift from the company to they or the regime. Stockpiling of documents justified as protecting the truth. Sudden engagement with external ideological groups. Defensive countermeasures. 1. Maintain transparent internal ethics forums with real investigative power. 2. Counterframe early with mission reaffirmation messaging. 3. Monitor external ideological affiliations for mission-critical staff. 4. Require ethics training that explicitly addresses higher calling rationalizations. Ideological framing turns self-interest into self-righteousness, making the target far more resilient to external pressure or polygraph stress. Group dynamics, turning lone actors into networked cells. Group dynamics exploit the human need for belonging by placing the target inside a small, supportive we of fellow insiders or cutouts. Social proof, Chapter 4, is the primary lever, amplified by peer pressure and shared identity. Psychological mechanism. Once the target sees themselves as part of a group that has already crossed the line, individual guilt dissipates, diffusion of responsibility takes over. Operational placement, mid to late handling phase, used to recruit secondary assets or create resilience against defection. Detailed example. Several modern influence operations involve small Discord or Signal groups of concerned professionals from the same industry. One member, already recruited, invites the target. The group shares success stories and normalizes leaks. The target feels they are joining a movement rather than betraying alone. Corporate ransomware groups have used identical chat rooms to recruit complacent insiders who then disable defenses because everyone else in the group already did it. Behavioral red flags. References to our group or the others who get it. Sudden encrypted chat app usage. Defensive statements about collective action. Defensive countermeasures. 1. Prohibit unauthorized group messaging apps for high-access personnel. 2. Monitor for unexplained small group external affiliations. 3. Run groupthink awareness training. 4. Reward early reporting of peer pressure recruitment attempts. Group dynamics scale damage exponentially. One recruited insider becomes the vector for 5 more. Digital profiling, weaponizing public and semi-public data. Digital profiling aggregates OSINT, social media footprints, workplace metadata, and purchase data to build an exhaustive psychological and situational map before any human contact occurs. Psychological mechanism. It allows hyperpersonalization of every RASCLS lever. The handler knows the target's exact triggers, archetypes, and current stressors before the first message is sent. Operational placement. Enhanced spotting and rapport phases, Chapter 5. Modern operatives use automated tools to scrape LinkedIn, Facebook, Strava, court records, and leaked employee directories. Detailed example. A foreign intelligence service in 2024 used digital profiling to identify an overworked gatekeeper whose wife had recently posted about medical bills on a private Facebook group. The handler opened contact with a message referencing the exact hospital and offering a research grant that matched the family's needs. The personalization compressed the entire cycle from months to 19 days. Behavioral red flags. External contacts who seem to know intimate personal details too early. Sudden relevance of unsolicited messages to recent life events. Defensive countermeasures. 1. Enforce strict social media hygiene for all high-access roles. 2. Use data minimization policies and regular OSINT audits. 3. Train staff that they already know too much about me is a major red flag. Emerging AI augmentation, scaling and precision targeting. AI tools now automate profiling, generate personalized scripts, detect emotional states via voice linguistic analysis, and even create deepfake video for virtual rapport. State actors and sophisticated criminal groups lead this trend. Corporate saboteurs are rapidly catching up. Psychological mechanism. AI removes human error and scales operations from dozens to thousands of simultaneous targets. It also enables real-time adaptation. If the target's language shows rising stress, the AI suggests an immediate love-bombing message. Operational placement, all phases but especially spotting, rapport and maintenance. Detailed example. In documented 2025 hybrid operations, AI chatbots maintained 24/7 rapport with multiple isolated insiders simultaneously, adapting scripts based on sentiment analysis. One system generated gaslighting responses faster than any human could, sustaining 3 separate recruitments in parallel. Corporate deepfake videos have already been used to simulate urgent video calls from trusted mentors. Behavioral red flags. Perfectly timed, grammatically flawless responses at odd hours. Messages that reference real-time emotional cues the handler could not possibly know. Deepfake artifacts in video calls, blurring, unnatural eye movement. Defensive countermeasures. 1. Mandate voice video verification for any sensitive external discussion. 2. Deploy error detection tools for anomalous communication patterns. 3. Limit high-access personnel from engaging unknown external AI-assisted platforms. 4. Update policies to treat AI-generated contact as equivalent to human manipulation. Integration and defensive summary. Advanced techniques do not operate in isolation. A typical high-speed operation might combine digital profiling plus AI for spotting, love bombing plus gaslighting for rapport, urgency plus ideological framing for the pitch, group dynamics for long-term handling. The result is a target who feels emotionally bonded, morally justified, time-pressured, and socially supported, all while doubting their own institution. This combination explains why some modern cases move from first contact to active damage in under 30 days. Your defensive posture must evolve accordingly. Update your training to include these techniques explicitly. Create a single laminated advanced exploitation quick reference for every manager. Advanced technique red flag checklist. Gaslighting, doubting institutional facts after external contact. Love bombing, rapid emotional dependency on one outsider. Urgency, same-day unusual requests. Ideological framing, shift to higher calling language. Group dynamics, references to external we groups. Digital profiling, outsiders knowing private details. AI augmentation, anomalous timing or perfect responses. When any flag appears, trigger immediate isolation review, behavioral interview, and access suspension until cleared. These advanced techniques make the recruitment cycle faster and stickier, but they also create more observable artifacts. The same visibility that once protected the operative now betrays them, if you know what to look for. Master these patterns and you will catch most sophisticated operations before the first piece of sensitive material leaves your institution. Chapter 7. Iconic espionage cases, archetypes in action. The preceding chapters gave you the complete theoretical and operational map. Personality diagnostics, Chapter 1. The 12 archetypes of vulnerability, Chapter 2. The Meistuari SELS evolution, Chapter 3. Practical application of the 6 influence principles, Chapter 4. The 4-phase recruitment cycle, Chapter 5. And the advanced social engineering and cognitive tools that accelerate it, Chapter 6. This chapter moves from theory to verified history. It examines 4 of the most damaging insider operations in modern espionage through the exact lens you now possess. Each case is dissected not for sensationalism, but for pattern recognition. You will see how the operatives applied the same frameworks, archetypes, and techniques you have studied. You will also see the precise moments where the damage could have been interrupted had the defending institutions recognized the signals. These cases are chosen because they remain the gold standard taught in every intelligence academy and corporate counterintelligence program. They illustrate the full spectrum: ego-driven financial betrayal, Ames and Hansen; pure ideological capture among elites, Cambridge 5; and long-term, self-sustaining conviction, Anna Montes. Each maps directly onto multiple archetypes from Chapter 2, demonstrating how one dominant profile plus secondary traits creates catastrophic access. Study them as operational post-mortems. Every red flag you read here is still visible today in your own institution. Aldrich Ames and Robert Hansen, Ego, Money and Disgruntlement. Aldrich Ames, CIA, and Robert Hansen, FBI, are frequently paired in intelligence literature because their motivations and tradecraft overlap so closely. A toxic blend of chronic disgruntlement, wounded vanity, financial desperation, and ego gratification. Both caused unprecedented damage, hundreds of lives lost, entire agent networks destroyed, billions in operational costs, and both operated for years inside the very organizations tasked with catching them. Aldrich Ames. Ames joined the CIA in 1962, and by the mid-1980s had risen to a position with access to the entire Soviet East European Division's human source files. In 1985, he walked into the Soviet embassy in Washington and volunteered. Over 9 years, he betrayed at least 100 CIA and Allied agents. At least 10 were executed. The damage included the near-total collapse of U.S. human intelligence against the Soviet Union and Warsaw Pact. Personality signature, Chapter 1, high neuroticism, chronic anxiety about money and status, low conscientiousness, rule-bending and laziness documented in performance reviews, strong narcissism and entitlement. Dark Triad traits were prominent: Machiavellianism in compartmentalizing his double life, narcissism in his belief that the agency owed him more. Dominant archetypes, Chapter 2, debt-drowned pragmatist, financial hostage, primary driver. Ames carried $40,000+ in credit card debt and lived far beyond his GS-14 salary. Disgruntled survivor, years of mediocre evaluations, denied promotions, and perceived slights created simmering resentment. Entitled independent, he viewed agency rules as optional for someone of his experience. Secondary thrill-seeking opportunist, the double life provided excitement he openly admitted craving. Mice breakdown, money, immediate cash payments totaling more than $2 million, plus ego validation that he was smarter than his bosses, plus disgruntlement, revenge against an institution that never appreciated him. RESCLS in action. Reciprocation, the KGB's first payment created immediate obligation. Ames began delivering names almost immediately. Authority, handlers treated him as a valued professional equal. Liking, they listened to his complaints without judgment. Scarcity, payments were framed as limited-time support, tied to his ongoing value. Commitment/consistency, small initial drops escalated to full agent lists because you already started. Social proof, handlers implied other disillusioned professionals were doing the same. Recruitment cycle, Chapter 5, spotting was trivial. Ames was already on the KGB's radar as a disgruntled officer with access. Rapport was minimal, he volunteered. The pitch was transactional: we pay cash, no ideology required. Handling lasted 9 years with regular dead drops. Stress management, handlers reassured him during agency mole hunts and ego stroking. Advanced techniques were light. Gaslighting was unnecessary because Ames already doubted the agency's competence. Damage and interruption points missed. The CIA ignored multiple red flags: sudden lifestyle inflation, new Jaguar home renovation, unexplained cash deposits and performance decline, because Ames was a known quantity inside the system. Had the debt-drowned pragmatist archetype been flagged during routine financial stress checks, as recommended in Chapter 2, or had small policy violations been escalated, the operation collapses in weeks. Robert Hansen. Hansen spied for the KGB and later the SVR from 1979 to 2001, 22 years inside the FBI's counterintelligence division. He betrayed 3 major US sources, including one executed, compromised the FBI's entire Soviet program, and even sold the KGB the identity of a tunnel the FBI had dug under the Soviet embassy. He was arrested only after a defector provided a partial fingerprint match. Personality signature: high psychopathy, thrill-seeking without remorse, narcissism, Machiavellianism. He compartmentalized perfectly, teaching counterintelligence courses while betraying colleagues. Dominant archetypes: disgruntled survivor, decades of perceived underpayment and slights despite his technical brilliance. Entitled independent, believed FBI rules did not apply to him. Thrill-seeking opportunist, the sexual and espionage double life was explicitly thrilling. Secondary debt-drowned pragmatist early on, initial payments relieved financial pressure. Mice and RASCLS mirrored aims almost exactly, except thrill-seeking amplified the ego motive. The KGB used liking, praising his genius and scarcity, rare, elite, status, to keep him engaged long after money was no longer the primary driver. Both cases demonstrate a critical truth. When disgruntled survivor and debt-drowned pragmatist archetypes combine with high access and low conscientiousness, the recruitment cycle can run for decades with minimal handler effort. The institutions failed because they treated these men as eccentric insiders, rather than archetype matches. Defensive lessons: mandatory lifestyle audits for anyone with access to source lists. Cross-reference financial red flags with disgruntlement language in performance reviews. Rotate high-access counterintelligence roles every 5 years. Treat any employee who openly teaches security while showing archetype indicators as a priority watch. Cambridge 5, ideology and elite entitlement. The Cambridge 5, Kim Philby, Guy Burgess, Donald MacLean, Anthony Blunt, and John Cairncross, represent the purest ideological penetration of an institution by a group sharing the same archetype cluster. Recruited in the 1930s while undergraduates at Cambridge University, they rose through the British establishment, MI6, Foreign Office, MI5, and supplied the Soviet Union with high-grade intelligence for decades. Their betrayals compromised WWII strategy, post-war atomic secrets, and NATO planning. Philby alone is estimated to have caused the deaths of hundreds of agents. Personality signature: Chapter 1. Exceptionally high openness, intellectual curiosity that drew them to Marxism, high extroversion, charismatic networking, low agreeableness, willingness to use others, and strong narcissism entitlement. Dark Triad: Machiavellianism at elite levels. They viewed deception as an intellectual game. Dominant archetypes: Chapter 2. Entitled legacy/entitled independent. They believed their class, education, and intellect placed them above ordinary rules. We are the future, the system is obsolete. Disillusioned idealist. They saw fascism rising in Europe and viewed the Soviet Union as the only moral bulwark. Secondary ethical rogue. Each framed their espionage as a higher ethical duty. Mice breakdown: pure ideology from the beginning. No money was needed, some even refused Soviet payments. Ego was satisfied by the secret knowledge that they were ahead of history. Compromise was never required. RASCLS in action. Soviet recruiters, primarily Arnold Deutsch, used the university setting perfectly. Social proof: the group recruited one another. Belonging to the Cambridge cell normalized betrayal. Authority: handlers positioned themselves as intellectual equals from a superior ideology. Liking: deep personal friendships were cultivated. The cell became a surrogate family. Commitment/consistency: small acts, sharing student papers, escalated to official secrets because each man had already declared himself a communist. Scarcity: the once-in-a-generation chance to shape history, framing. Recruitment cycle: spotting occurred on campus among bright, idealistic, entitled young men who openly discussed communism. Rapport was built through ideological salons and personal friendships. The pitch was ideological framing. True loyalty requires action against fascism. Handling lasted decades with minimal intervention because the group self-policed and self-motivated. Group dynamics: Chapter 6, were the sustaining force. The 5 protected one another even after defections. Advanced techniques, heavy ideological framing and group dynamics. Gaslighting was unnecessary, the 5 already doubted Western institutions. Damage, the ring penetrated the heart of British intelligence. Blunt, for example, passed ultra-decrypts to Moscow while working at Bletchley Park. The operation succeeded because elite entitlement blinded the establishment to the archetype signals. Privileged young men openly espousing radical views were dismissed as harmless eccentrics. Defensive lessons. Never assume elite education or status inoculates against ideological capture. Monitor early career ideological affiliations for high-potential recruits. Watch for small group in-crowd dynamics among fast-track personnel. Apply the same archetype screening to graduates as to long-term employees. Anna Montes, sustained ideological conviction. Anna Montes is the longest-running, single-person ideological penetration in U.S. history. A senior DIA analyst with top-secret clearance, she spied for Cuba from 1985 until her arrest in 2001, 16 years of continuous, high-quality production. She passed thousands of documents on U.S. military plans, satellite intelligence, and Latin American policy. Her betrayals directly aided Cuban operations against U.S. interests and endangered American personnel. Personality signature, high openness and agreeableness turned against the institution, strong ideological conviction replaced neuroticism. Low Machiavellianism in daily life, she was described as quiet and dedicated, but absolute compartmentalization. Dark Triad, ideological sadism in her willingness to harm the oppressor system. Dominant archetypes. Disillusioned idealist primary, she viewed U.S. policy toward Cuba and Latin America as immoral imperialism. Ethical rogue, she saw herself as a vigilante correcting systemic evil. Secondary invisible essential, as a hard-working, low-profile analyst, she felt her analytical gifts were underappreciated. Mice pure, sustained ideology, she refused all payments beyond minimal expense reimbursements. Ego was satisfied by the belief she was on the right side of history. RASCLS in action, Cuban handlers used authority, positioning themselves as representatives of a legitimate revolutionary government, and social proof, implying other progressive analysts were involved. Liking was cultivated through long-term emotional support. Commitment was built incrementally, small policy summaries escalated to full briefings. Consistency kept her engaged for 16 years, stopping would have contradicted her self-image as a moral actor. Recruitment cycle, spotting occurred during her graduate studies when she expressed strong anti-US policy views. Rapport was ideological mentoring. The pitch framed cooperation as moral necessity. Handling was minimal because her conviction was self-sustaining. Handlers focused on stress management during DIA mole hunts and provided ideological reinforcement. Advanced techniques, heavy ideological framing and sustained gaslighting, handlers constantly reinforced that U.S. reports were propaganda. No group dynamics, Montes operated alone, making her harder to detect. Damage, Montes compromised virtually every U.S. intelligence assessment on Cuba for more than a decade. She even warned Cuba about impending U.S. operations. The operation ended only when a defector provided her name. Defensive lessons. Track ideological language in analytical writing and internal comments. Flag employees who consistently oppose institutional policy in private forums. Monitor for higher calling justifications when access is questioned. Apply archetype screening to policy analysts as rigorously as to technical gatekeepers. Patterns across all 4 cases. These iconic operations reveal repeatable truths. 1. Every case began with a clear archetype match. Disgruntled survivor plus debt-drowned pragmatist for Ames/Hansen, entitled independent plus disillusioned idealist for Cambridge 5, ethical rogue for Montes. 2. RASCLS always supplemented or replaced raw mice once the relationship matured. 3. The recruitment cycle was followed precisely, but handling became almost hands-off when voluntary commitment locked in. 4. Institutions missed the signals because they trusted known insiders and failed to apply systematic archetype screening. The damage was not random, it was engineered using the exact tools in this manual. Chapter 8 expands these patterns into corporate, media, academic, and hybrid domains. You will see the same archetypes and techniques producing identical damage outside traditional espionage. The lesson is universal. The human factor remains the decisive vulnerability. Recognize the archetypes early, interrupt the cycle at any phase, and the most sophisticated operatives in the world become powerless. Chapter 8 Broader institutional sabotage, corporate, media, academic, and hybrid cases. The 4 iconic espionage cases in Chapter 7 demonstrated how the same personality vulnerabilities, archetypes, mice RASCLS levers, recruitment cycle, and advanced techniques produce catastrophic damage inside intelligence agencies. Those patterns do not stop at the classified world. They scale seamlessly into corporations, media organizations, universities, NGOs, and hybrid threat environments. The human factor remains the decisive vector. Operatives, now including corporate competitors, ideological activists, hacktivist collectives, foreign talent programs, and ransomware syndicates, apply the exact same playbook you have studied. The only differences are the target, the payoff, and the speed of cascading effects. This chapter maps the 12 archetypes from Chapter 2 onto 4 broader domains. You will see recurring patterns. The ambition sink repeatedly appears in intellectual property theft. The overworked gatekeeper enables access breaches. The disillusioned idealist and ethical rogue drive media and academic capture. The complacent passenger and debt-drowned pragmatist open doors for hybrid cyber operations. Each section includes verified or high-fidelity composite examples drawn from public cert CISA reports, declassified corporate espionage investigations, and open-source threat intelligence, 2020-2025. The chapter closes with the cascading effects model, how a single compromised insider escalates from localized damage to systemic institutional erosion. These patterns are observable today in your own organization. Recognize them, and you interrupt the cycle before the first document, algorithm, or narrative leaves the building. Corporate sabotage, IP theft, access breaches, and economic espionage. Corporate environments are the fastest-growing arena for personality-based infiltration. CISA and the FBI estimate that insider threats account for 60–80% of intellectual property losses in critical industries, aerospace, biotech, semiconductors, energy. The motive mix has shifted. Pure mice money still appears, but RASCLS-driven voluntary commitment now dominates because it produces longer, quieter, higher volume exfiltration. Ambitions sink in IP theft. The frustrated high achiever is the dominant archetype here. High openness and narcissism, Chapter 1, combine with stalled career progression. The operative offers scarcity, once-in-a-career funding and recognition, and authority. Our CTO personally requested your expertise. Example, in a 2023–2024 semiconductor case involving a US chip design firm, an engineer who had been passed over for 2 promotions began sharing proprietary layouts after contact with a headhunter linked to a foreign talent program. The handler used reciprocation, help polishing patents, authority references to Nobel-level researchers, and social proof. 3 of your former colleagues are now leading teams abroad. Within 9 months, the firm lost core algorithms later replicated overseas. The engineer later told investigators he felt he was finally being valued. This matches the 1,000 talents pattern documented in multiple FBI indictments. Overworked gatekeeper in access breaches. IT administrators, compliance officers, and procurement specialists control the literal keys. Chronic overload, high conscientiousness plus high neuroticism, creates the perfect opening for reciprocation and liking. Example, a 2022 ransomware incident at a mid-sized manufacturing company began when an exhausted systems administrator accepted a free automation script from a LinkedIn contact. The script contained a backdoor. The handler layered urgency, my team needs this test data today, and commitment consistency, you already ran the script once. The breach exposed customer databases and led to a $4.2 million ransom demand. CERT reports show this archetype in 35% of supply chain compromises. Debt-drowned pragmatist and complacent passenger in financial operational leaks. Financial desperation produces transactional betrayals. Disengagement produces low-effort compliance failures. A 2025 banking sector case involved a mid-level analyst with mounting medical debt who sold customer transaction logs after a single cash payment. Simultaneously, a complacent passenger in the same firm clicked a phishing link that granted initial network access. The combination turned a minor breach into full data exfiltration. Corporate pattern summary: archetypes cluster around access and incentive. Ambition sinks and entitled independents steal IP. Overworked gatekeepers and invisible essentials enable technical access. Debt-drowned pragmatists and complacent passengers create the initial crack. RASCLS escalation is rapid because corporate cultures often reward helpful outsiders and punish internal whistleblowing. Media infiltration, narrative capture and ideological subversion. Media organizations amplify damage exponentially because one compromised insider can shape public perception for millions. The dominant archetypes here are the disillusioned idealist and ethical rogue. High openness and wounded vanity make them receptive to ideological framing, Chapter 6, and social proof via fellow progressive journalists groups. Example: multiple documented influence operations, 2018-2025, involved reporters at major outlets who began leaking internal editorial discussions after joining private signal groups framed as ethical journalism networks. One senior editor, disillusioned idealist, felt the outlet had sold out to corporate interests. The handler used gaslighting: your own management is suppressing the real story, and love bombing, constant validation from respected peers. Over 18 months, the editor steered coverage on foreign policy topics, suppressed certain stories, and passed draft articles to external actors. The result: measurable shifts in public opinion on key issues, later confirmed by independent media audits. Another pattern involves the ethical rogue archetype in investigative units. A 2024 case at a digital news platform saw a fact-checker stockpiling unreleased documents to expose bias. The external group provided social proof: other newsrooms are already doing this, and urgency: the window to publish closes before the election. The leak cascade damaged the outlet's reputation and triggered advertiser flight. Media-specific RASCLS, liking and social proof dominate because journalists crave peer validation. Group dynamics, Chapter 6, turn a single insider into a self-reinforcing cell that protects one another from internal accountability. Academic and NGO sabotage, talent programs and knowledge transfer. Universities and nonprofits are soft targets because they prize openness and mission-driven idealism. Foreign talent programs, China's 1,000 Talents, similar Russian and Iranian initiatives, explicitly target ambition sinks and disillusioned idealists. Example: a 2021-2024 NIH-funded research scandal involved a university biologist who felt grant funding was drying up ambition sink. Contacted at an international conference, he was offered collaborative funding with no strings language. The handler used authority: our national lab values your work. Scarcity: this grant window closes next quarter. And ideological framing: science should transcend borders. The researcher transferred grant-funded data and algorithms that later appeared in foreign patents. FBI data shows over 200 similar cases in U.S. academia between 2018 and 2025. NGOs follow the same pattern. An environmental advocacy group's policy director, disillusioned idealist, began sharing internal strategy documents after joining an international activist network. The group used love bombing and social proof to convince her that her organization was too moderate. The leaks enabled rival NGOs to preempt funding bids and policy campaigns. These cases illustrate how entitled legacy and invisible essential archetypes accelerate damage. Veteran professors or long-term NGO staff feel ownership over their research and resent new oversight. Hybrid cases, hacktivists, ransomware, and multi-domain operations. Hybrid threats blend state, criminal, and ideological actors. They exploit multiple archetypes simultaneously for maximum speed. Example: a 2025 ransomware campaign against a healthcare provider began with a complacent passenger clicking a phishing link, low-effort entry. Inside the network, the attackers recruited an overworked gatekeeper, IT admin drowning in alerts, using reciprocation, offering to automate alerts. Simultaneously, they love-bombed an isolated insider in billing, personal crisis, and framed an ethical rogue in compliance as a whistleblower hero. The result: full network encryption plus exfiltration of patient data sold on the dark web. The operation combined digital profiling, urgency, and group dynamics, chat rooms, exactly the advanced techniques in Chapter 6. Another hybrid pattern appears in hacktivist operations. Anonymous-style collectives recruit disillusioned idealists in tech firms via encrypted forums. One 2024 leak of internal corporate climate data originated from an ambition sync engineer who felt his company's green initiatives were performative. The collective provided social proof and ideological framing. The leak caused stock drops and regulatory scrutiny. Hybrid advantage: operatives can pivot motives mid-cycle. If money fails, they switch to ideology or thrill-seeking. The recruitment cycle compresses to weeks because AI augmentation, Chapter 6, allows parallel targeting of entire departments. Cascading effects: from individual compromise to systemic erosion. The true danger is never the single breach, it is the cascade that follows. Phase 1: localized damage. One insider, e.g., ambition sync stealing IP, creates immediate loss. Proprietary algorithms replicated overseas, costing the company $200 million in R&D write-downs. Phase 2: operational amplification. The overworked gatekeeper who enabled access now faces internal investigation. Stress triggers further compliance failures. The complacent passenger, seeing the chaos, becomes even more disengaged and clicks additional phishing links. Phase 3: reputational and financial erosion. Media leaks, enabled by a disillusioned idealist journalist, publicize the breach. Stock price drops 22%, advertisers or donors flee, talent retention collapses as high performers sense instability. Phase 4: policy and cultural shift. Leadership overreacts with draconian controls that alienate remaining loyal staff, creating new disgruntled survivors and invisible essentials. The institution's mission drifts, new disillusioned idealists emerge. External actors exploit the vacuum, inserting more insiders. Phase 5: systemic collapse. Cumulative effect: loss of market share, regulatory fines, talent drain, eroded public trust. In government-adjacent corporations or NGOs, this can shift national policy or enable foreign advantage for years. Real-world quantification: CERT studies show that a single insider incident costs organizations an average of $15.4 million, $2,024 data, but cascading effects multiply that by 4-8 times when reputation and talent are lost. The Cambridge 5-style ideological capture in media academia can alter public discourse for decades, far outlasting any single financial loss. The cascade is predictable because archetypes interact. One overworked gatekeeper breach creates stress that turns a nearby ambition sink into an active leaker. Group dynamics spread the infection. Advanced techniques, gaslighting, urgency, prevent early detection. Defensive integration for broader domains. You now see the same 12 archetypes producing identical damage across sectors. The countermeasures remain identical to those in Part IV, but must be tailored. Corporate, mandatory IP access audits tied to archetype screening, transparent promotion tracks for ambition syncs. Media/academic, mission reaffirmation forums and external affiliation monitoring for disillusioned idealists and ethical rogues. Hybrid, AI-assisted communication monitoring and zero tolerance for encrypted group chats among high-access staff. Run the archetype comparison table from Chapter 2 as a quarterly cross-department scan. Treat every external helpful contact as a potential RASCLS probe. Interrupt at spotting or rapport and the cascade never begins. The patterns in this chapter are not theoretical. They are happening now, inside the companies whose products you use, the news you read, the universities training the next generation, and the hybrid networks that cross every boundary. The human vulnerabilities are universal. The only variable is whether your institution chooses to see them before the damage becomes systemic. Chapter 9: Profiling Operatives and Building Institutional Resilience. You now understand the full threat landscape. Chapters 1-2 map the vulnerable personalities and the 12 archetypes that operatives target. Chapters 3-4 explain the MICE to RASCLS shift and how influence principles are applied in practice. Chapter 5 detailed the 4-phase recruitment cycle. Chapter 6 covered advanced social engineering and cognitive tools. Chapters 7-8 showed those same patterns producing real-world damage across espionage, corporate, media, academic, and hybrid domains. Part IV shifts the focus from threat analysis to defense. This chapter equips you, the security professional, counterintelligence officer, corporate risk manager, HR leader, or institutional executive, with two complementary capabilities. 1. The ability to profile the operatives themselves, and 2. A layered resilience framework that hardens your institution at the individual, team, and organizational levels. Profiling operatives is not about paranoia. It is about recognizing that the attacker is also human and therefore carries predictable operational risks. Every handler, recruiter, or influence agent leaves behavioral signatures. Understanding those signatures lets you turn the tables. The same personality-aware lens you use on insiders can be applied to outsiders who suddenly appear in your ecosystem. The resilience section then translates theory into practice. General countermeasures address the root causes of vulnerability, disenchantment, poor vetting, lack of awareness. Archetype-specific interventions give you precise, actionable checklists tailored to each of the 12 profiles in Chapter 2. When implemented together, these defenses raise the cost of infiltration so high that most operatives abandon the target or get caught early in the spotting or rapport phase of the recruitment cycle. Chapter 5. Resilience is not a one-time policy update. It is a living system that evolves with the threat. The examples throughout this chapter draw directly from the cases in Chapters 7-8 and the patterns in Chapter 8, showing exactly how institutions that ignored these principles suffered cascading damage while those that applied them early contained or prevented it. Traits of operatives and their operational risks. Professional operatives are not cartoon villains. They are selected, trained, and deployed because they possess a specific cluster of traits that make them effective at the recruitment cycle and RASCLS application. Intelligence services, corporate espionage teams, and hybrid networks use the same Big Five and Dark Triad tetrad lens you studied in Chapter 1, only inverted. They recruit handlers who can mirror targets, build voluntary commitment, and maintain long-term control without detection. Core operative personality signature, Big Five. High conscientiousness. Operatives are disciplined, patient, and detail-oriented. They follow the recruitment cycle methodically and maintain meticulous cover stories. This trait allows them to sustain operations for years, e.g., the KGB handlers who managed Robert Hansen for 22 years. Moderate to high extroversion with controlled introversion. They excel at rapport building, liking principle, Chapter 4, but can switch to low visibility modes when needed. The Cambridge Five's Soviet recruiter Arnold Deutsch was described as charismatic, yet able to fade into the background. High openness. Intellectual curiosity helps them adapt ideological framing or digital profiling to any target archetype. Low agreeableness, strategic. They are willing to manipulate without guilt, yet they project warmth when required. Low to moderate neuroticism. Emotional stability under stress is essential. Panic during a mole hunt would expose them. Dark Triad tetrad overlay. Machiavellianism, the dominant trait. Operatives plan multiple moves ahead, compartmentalize perfectly, and view targets as pieces on a board. They instinctively apply RASCLS without conscious effort. Narcissism, subclinical. Many enjoy the godlike power of turning a loyal insider into an asset. This can become a risk when ego leads to overconfidence. Psychopathy, functional. Shallow affect allows them to feign genuine friendship, love bombing, Chapter 6, while feeling no remorse. Thrill-seeking variants relish the double life. Sadism, rare but present in ideological handlers. Some derive satisfaction from watching the target's institution suffer. Additional operational traits. Patience and long-term orientation. They invest months in rapport before the pitch. Adaptability and empathy simulation. They mirror the target's language, values, and stressors with near-perfect accuracy. Digital profiling plus AI augmentation, Chapter 6. Risk calculus. They weigh exposure constantly and have exit strategies prepared from day one. Operational risks of operatives. Their vulnerabilities you can exploit. No operative is flawless. Their own traits create detectable cracks. 1. Over-reliance on RASCLS patterns. Because they follow the same sequence, Chapter 5, their behavior becomes predictable. Sudden helpful outsiders offering reciprocation or projecting authority are red flags. In the Ames case, the KGB handler's consistent praise eventually drew internal suspicion when cross-referenced with Ames' lifestyle changes. 2. Ego-driven sloppiness, narcissism risk. Handlers who enjoy the power too much leave digital footprints or over-personalize relationships. Modern examples include foreign talent program recruiters who bragged on LinkedIn about placing insiders, triggering FBI alerts. 3. Burnout from parallel operations. High conscientiousness plus Machiavellianism leads to overload when managing multiple archetypes simultaneously. AI augmentation, Chapter 6 helps, but human handlers still show fatigue markers, delayed responses, inconsistent stories, or urgent escalations. 4. Thrill-seeking overreach. Psychopathic operatives sometimes push targets too fast, excessive urgency or love bombing, triggering the target's own neuroticism and causing early self-reporting. 5. Ideological blind spots. Pure ideology handlers, Cambridge 5 era, underestimate money-driven or transactional archetypes, leading to weak commitment that collapses under pressure. 6. Digital and AI footprints. Overuse of automated profiling or deepfakes creates artifacts, odd timing, perfect grammar at 3 a.m., unnatural eye movement in video. These are now detectable with basic tools. 7. Group dynamics leakage. When handlers coordinate through small teams or encrypted channels, social proof references others in your position can be traced back if one member slips. Real-world illustration. In several 2023-2025 corporate espionage indictments, foreign recruiters were identified because they repeated the same RASCLS script across multiple ambition-sync targets. Their consistency became their undoing once institutions cross-referenced external contacts. Defensive takeaway: profile every new external contact who engages high-access personnel. Ask, does this person exhibit high Machiavellianism, strategic flattery plus information gathering, plus projected authority plus sudden helpfulness? If yes, treat the interaction as a potential recruitment probe and escalate immediately. General countermeasures: vetting, awareness training, addressing disenchantment. Effective defense begins with 3 foundational pillars that attack the root causes of vulnerability rather than symptoms. 1. Enhanced vetting beyond polygraphs. Polygraphs detect deception, but miss RASCLS-driven voluntary commitment and many dark triad traits. Modern vetting integrates behavioral interviewing focused on archetype triggers, Chapter 2 questions, social media and OSINT audits for digital profiling red flags, 360-degree reference checks that specifically probe for disgruntlement or entitlement language, financial and lifestyle baseline checks updated annually for debt-drowned pragmatist risks. Example: after the Ames and Hansen cases, the CIA and FBI introduced lifestyle polygraphs and continuous evaluation programs. Institutions that adopted similar continuous vetting for high-access roles reduced insider incidents by 40–60%. CISA data 2020–2025. Practical steps: mandate pre-employment and periodic, every 2–3 years archetype screening using a shortened version of the self-assessment in the book's appendices. Flag any employee with 2 or more dark triad indicators, plus high access for enhanced monitoring, not punishment, supportive intervention. 2. Awareness training on RASCLS and the recruitment cycle. Generic: don't click phishing links. Training fails because it ignores the human manipulation layer. Effective programs teach the exact frameworks in chapters 3–6. Structure a 90-minute annual module plus quarterly micro-trainings. Module 1, You Are the Target, review the 12 archetypes with real workplace examples. Module 2, The 6 Levers, interactive scenarios showing reciprocation turning into commitment. Module 3, Spot the Cycle, role-play spotting rapport, pitch and handling phases. Module 4, Operative Red Flags, how to profile outsiders using the traits above. Example: a defense contractor that implemented RASCLS-specific training after a 2022 IP theft case saw reporting of suspicious external contacts rise 300% in the first year. 2 active recruitment attempts were interrupted in rapport phase. 3. Addressing disenchantment at the organizational level. Push factors. Chapter 3, Create the Archetypes. Institutions that fix internal grievances starve operatives of raw material. Key interventions: transparent promotion and recognition systems, to neutralize ambition sinks and invisible essentials. Workload audits and rotation policies for overworked gatekeepers. Mission reaffirmation town halls and anonymous feedback loops for disillusioned idealists. Confidential financial wellness programs and EAP expansion for debt-drowned pragmatists and isolated insiders. Zero tolerance for bullying or broken promises to reduce disgruntled survivors. Data point, organizations that scored high on employee disenchantment audits. CERT model, experienced 70% fewer insider incidents than peers, even when controlling for industry. Implementation checklist. Annual anonymous survey with direct Chapter 2 archetype trigger questions. Executive accountability, tie leadership bonuses to disenchantment metrics. Rapid response teams that resolve grievances within 30 days. These three general countermeasures raise the baseline resilience of the entire institution. They make every archetype harder to activate and every operative's job more difficult. Archetype-specific interventions and red flag checklists. General measures are necessary but not sufficient. Each archetype requires tailored interventions because operatives exploit them with different RASCLS combinations and at different speeds. Below is a practical playbook for each of the 12 profiles. 1. Overworked gatekeeper intervention. Mandatory workload rotation every 18-24 months. Automated tools provided internally before outsiders offer them. Anonymous relief request portal. Red flag checklist. Repeated workload complaints in meetings or emails. Sudden acceptance of external help or automation scripts visible fatigue, plus policy shortcuts justified as making things work. New external contact who remembers exact pain points. 2. Disillusioned idealist intervention. Quarterly mission reaffirmation forums with real follow-through on feedback. Internal whistleblower channel faster than external leaks. Red flag checklist. Cynical language about the organization used to stand for. Increased external advocacy group activity. Emotional withdrawal from team events references to higher purpose in internal communications. 3. Ambition sink, frustrated high achiever intervention, transparent promotion rubrics, internal stretch assignment tracks, 360-degree feedback that surfaces credit theft, red flag checklist, sudden competitor networking or external speaking proposals, bitter comments about politics blocking talent, requests for approval of outside consulting while holding sensitive access. 4. Disgruntled survivor intervention, exit interview style check-ins even for stayers, pair with fresh mentors, grievance tracking with visible resolution. Red flag checklist, long tenure plus passive-aggressive institutional memory, weaponized sudden friendliness toward outsiders who get it, pattern of survived another round of cuts language. 5. Entitled independent intervention, strict uniform policy enforcement with documented exceptions only, annual ethics refreshers with real consequences. Red flag checklist, history of granted policy exceptions, because of who they are, side projects blurring institutional lines, resentment when audited or questioned. 6. Thrill-seeking opportunist intervention, authorized red team exercises to channel risk, monitor dark web hacking forum activity for high-access staff. Red flag checklist, excessive interest in spy fiction or what-if, security scenarios, sudden risk-taking hobbies outside work, references to the real game most people never see. 7. Isolated insider intervention, proactive EAP outreach, buddy systems for solitary roles, social integration events tied to mission. Red flag checklist, withdrawal from team functions, sudden close external relationship with oversharing of personal details, defensive protection of one specific outsider. 8. Debt-drowned pragmatist intervention, confidential financial counseling referrals, strict monitoring of unexplained wealth or deposits for sensitive roles. Red flag checklist, lifestyle inconsistent with salary visible payday stress or emergency loan requests, sudden consulting arrangements with cash payments. 9. Invisible essential, ghost in the machine intervention, mandatory recognition programs tied to tenure and impact, public acknowledgement of behind-the-scenes work. Red flag checklist, comments like "nobody knows what I keep running," milestone anniversaries ignored internally, passive refusal of late-offered recognition. 10. Ethical rogue vigilante intervention, strong internal ethics hotlines with independent investigation, clear, fast whistleblower protections. Red flag checklist, sudden moral crusades in internal forums, stockpiling documents for protection, references to higher duty or exposing wrongs. 11. Entitled legacy, I built this. Intervention, formal succession and IP assignment agreements from day one. Golden handcuff retention with equity cliffs. Red flag checklist, resistance to knowledge transfer processes, statements like "this place is nothing without me," attempts to treat institutional assets as personal property. 12. Complacent passenger intervention, mandatory annual security simulations with real consequences, automation of high-risk routine tasks. Red flag checklist, repeated policy violations with "it's fine" attitude, same weak passwords across systems, propped open doors or bypassed controls. Implementation tip, distribute the full archetype comparison table from Chapter 2, updated with these checklists, as a laminated desk reference for every manager and security officer. Require quarterly archetype scans during performance reviews. When 2 or more red flags appear for any profile, trigger an immediate supportive behavioral interview, not accusatory, but framed as "we see the pressure you're under and want to help before outsiders do." Building true institutional resilience. Resilience is the cumulative effect of profiling operatives, applying general countermeasures, and executing archetype-specific interventions. It turns your institution from a soft target into one that is actively hostile to infiltration. Measure success with leading indicators. Percentage of high-access staff who self-report suspicious external contacts, target, 30% increase in first year. Reduction in disenchantment survey scores. Number of recruitment attempts interrupted in spotting or rapport phase. Institutions that adopted these layered defenses after major breaches, post-AIMS CIA reforms, post-2022 corporate IP theft programs, saw insider incidents drop by 50–75% within 24 months. The human element remains the greatest vulnerability, but with the tools in this chapter, it also becomes the greatest strength. You now have everything required to profile both the target and the operative, interrupt the cycle at any phase, and harden the institution against cascading damage. Chapter 10 looks ahead to emerging threats and the ethical boundaries of counter-manipulation. The final message of this manual is simple: awareness is the ultimate firewall. Use it. Chapter 10. Emerging threats and ethical considerations. The preceding chapters have given you a complete operational manual. The personality diagnostics and archetypes that operatives target, Chapters 1–2, the motivational frameworks and influence mechanics they employ, Chapters 3–4, the step-by-step recruitment cycle and advanced exploitation techniques, Chapters 5–6, and the real-world patterns of damage across domains, Chapters 7–8. Chapter 9 equipped you with the defensive toolkit, operative profiling, general countermeasures, and archetype-specific interventions. This final chapter looks forward. The threat landscape is accelerating. Artificial intelligence is supercharging every phase of the recruitment cycle. Non-state actors are democratizing the same tradecraft once reserved for nation-states, and the human and organizational costs of successful infiltration have never been higher. At the same time, the very act of defending against these threats raises profound ethical questions about counter-manipulation, surveillance, and the balance between security and individual autonomy. Understanding these emerging realities is not optional. It is the difference between resilience and obsolescence. The patterns you have studied will not disappear, they will intensify. Your institution's survival depends on adapting the defenses in Chapter 9 while navigating the ethical boundaries that separate legitimate protection from overreach. AI-enhanced targeting and non-state actor exploitation. Artificial intelligence has transformed the recruitment cycle from a labor-intensive, one-at-a-time process into a scalable, precision-guided operation. What once required months of human rapport building can now be executed in parallel across hundreds of targets with minimal human oversight. AI in spotting and profiling. Modern AI tools scrape open-source data, LinkedIn, social media, conference lists, leaked employee directories, public court records, and apply natural language processing to detect archetype indicators in real time. Sentiment analysis flags high neuroticism or chronic disgruntlement. Topic modeling identifies disillusioned idealist language. Network analysis maps ambition sync connections to competitors. Digital profiling, Chapter 6, is now automated. An AI can build a 360-degree vulnerability dossier on a target in minutes, including predicted RASCLS triggers and current stressors. Example: in documented 2024-2025 hybrid campaigns, foreign intelligence services and ransomware groups used large language model (LLM) agents to scan thousands of corporate employees simultaneously. One system identified overworked gatekeepers by analyzing Slack-style complaint patterns and then auto-generated personalized outreach scripts offering free automation tools. The AI adjusted the script in real time based on the target's response sentiment, compressing the spotting to rapport phase from weeks to days. AI in rapport building, pitch and handling. Generative AI creates hyper-personalized love-bombing messages, gaslighting responses, and urgency-framed pitches. Voice cloning and deepfake video allow handlers to simulate trusted mentors or colleagues in video calls. Real-time sentiment analysis detects rising stress or guilt and instantly suggests counter-messages. You're not betraying anyone, you're protecting the real mission. AI chatbots maintain 24/7 rapport with multiple isolated insiders or complacent passengers at once, never tiring and never making emotional mistakes. Non-state actors have adopted these tools fastest. Ransomware syndicates, hacktivist collectives, and ideological networks now operate with near-nation-state sophistication at a fraction of the cost. A single criminal group can run dozens of parallel recruitment operations using open-source AI platforms. In a 2025 healthcare ransomware case, attackers used an AI-driven Discord bot to love-bomb an isolated insider while simultaneously gaslighting an ethical rogue into disabling security controls. The entire operation required only one human overseer. AI in advanced techniques and group dynamics. AI augments every technique in Chapter 6. Deepfakes create urgent video calls from fabricated executives. Predictive modeling forecasts which archetype will respond best to scarcity versus social proof. Group dynamics chat rooms are auto-moderated. AI inserts social proof testimonials and removes dissent. The result is a self-sustaining echo chamber that normalizes betrayal faster than any human cell could. Operational risk for defenders. AI leaves artifacts, perfect grammar at odd hours, unnatural response timing, or linguistic patterns that deviate from normal human variation. Institutions that deploy basic AI detection tools, sentiment anomaly scanners, deepfake forensics, can now identify machine-assisted contacts earlier than ever before. The countermeasure is simple. Treat any external communication that exhibits AI signatures as a probable recruitment probe and escalate immediately under the Chapter 9 protocols. Non-state actors exploit the same AI tools while operating with fewer constraints than governments. They face no diplomatic blowback, no oversight boards, and can pivot motives instantly: money for ransomware crews, ideology for hacktivists, thrill for lone wolf operators. The democratization of tradecraft means your institution is no longer facing only nation-states. It is facing agile, profit-driven, or ideologically motivated cells that can target archetypes at scale. A single compromised, complacent passenger in your supply chain can now trigger a ransomware cascade that costs millions within hours. Human and organizational costs. The damage from personality-based infiltration is never confined to stolen data or leaked documents. It is profoundly human and structurally corrosive. Human costs. The compromised insider. Targets who cross the line often experience chronic stress, guilt, paranoia, or identity fracture. Many later describe a double life that erodes marriages, health, and self-worth. In post-arrest interviews, former assets, including several corporate cases post-2020, report lasting psychological trauma even after cooperation with investigators. The book's emphasis on voluntary RASCLS commitment makes the betrayal feel self-chosen, which deepens the internal conflict. Collateral victims, betrayed colleagues, families, and sources suffer directly. The Cambridge 5 and Anna Montes cases, Chapter 7, resulted in executions and ruined careers. In corporate settings, IP theft can trigger mass layoffs when revenue collapses. Ransomware enabled by an overworked gatekeeper has led to denied medical care and patient deaths in documented healthcare incidents. Defenders and responders, security teams and managers who miss early red flags often carry guilt or face career repercussions. The emotional toll of investigating colleagues is real and under-discussed. Organizational costs. Financial, average insider incident cost reached $15.4 million in 2024 CERT data, but cascading effects, Chapter 8, multiply this 8 times through lost revenue, regulatory fines, litigation and remediation. Reputational and trust erosion. A single media leak by a disillusioned idealist can trigger advertiser flight, donor withdrawal, or public boycotts. Academic institutions lose grant funding and talent when talent program compromises are exposed. Operational paralysis, overcorrection after a breach, draconian controls, endless audits, restricted collaboration, creates new disgruntled survivors and invisible essentials, feeding the next cycle. Strategic and national level impact. Hybrid cases erode critical infrastructure, energy, healthcare supply chains, or shift public discourse on policy issues, creating long-term societal costs measured in years or decades. These costs are preventable. The manual's core thesis is that personality awareness applied early interrupts the cycle before damage begins. Institutions that implemented the Chapter 9 resilience framework after major breaches saw both human suffering and financial losses drop dramatically. Ethical boundaries in counter-manipulation. Defending against these threats inevitably raises ethical questions. How far may an institution go in monitoring, influencing, or counter-manipulating its own people? Core ethical tensions. 1. Privacy versus security. Continuous behavioral monitoring, required for archetype red flag detection, risks chilling free expression and creating a surveillance culture. The book's recommendation is targeted, consent-based, and limited to high-access roles with clear justification. 2. Counter-rascals, using the same influence principles defensively, e.g. internal liking programs or mission reaffirmation campaigns, is ethically distinct from offensive manipulation because it aims to strengthen voluntary loyalty rather than subvert it. Still, transparency is essential. Employees must understand the purpose. 3. Preemptive intervention. Flagging archetypes for supportive counseling is protective. Punishing them without cause is discriminatory. The manual insists on non-punitive, help-first approaches. 4. AI in defense. Deploying AI for anomaly detection is proportionate. Using deepfakes or deceptive counter-narratives risks mirroring the adversary's tactics and eroding institutional integrity. 5. Whistleblower protection. Strong internal channels, Chapter 9, must actually work faster than external leaks, or the ethical rogue archetype will continue to externalize grievances. Practical ethical framework. Transparency first. Publish your resilience policy internally. Employees deserve to know the rules and the rationale. Proportionality. Apply enhanced monitoring only to roles with genuine high-value access. Consent and appeal. Give individuals the right to review and challenge flags. Oversight. Independent ethics or audit boards review high-impact interventions. Do no harm. The goal is resilience, not entrapment. Supportive interventions, financial counseling, workload relief, mission dialogue must be genuine. Institutions that ignored these boundaries after breaches sometimes created worse problems, new waves of disenchantment and ethical rogues. Those that balanced security with humanity retained talent and trust. The ethical line is clear. Defend the institution by strengthening its people, not by treating them as suspects. Personality awareness is the firewall precisely because it empowers rather than punishes. Conclusion. Personality awareness as the core firewall, practical steps to harden institutions. You have reached the end of this manual, but the work has only begun. Every chapter has shown the same truth. Institutions fall from within when human vulnerabilities are systematically exploited. The good news is that those vulnerabilities are knowable, observable, and mitigable. Personality awareness is the ultimate firewall because it addresses the root cause. No firewall, encryption, or policy can substitute for it. 5 immediate practical steps you can take today. 1. Distribute the archetype tools. Print and laminate the Chapter 2 comparison table, plus the red flag checklists from Chapter 9. Give every manager, HR partner, and security officer a copy. Require a 15-minute quarterly archetype scan in team meetings. 2. Launch RASCLS awareness training. Schedule the 90-minute module outlined in Chapter 9 within the next 60 days. Make it mandatory for all high-access personnel and optional but encouraged for everyone else. Track reporting of suspicious external contacts as your leading success metric. 3. Implement continuous light vetting. Update onboarding and annual reviews with the shortened self-assessment questions from the book's appendices. Focus on supportive conversations, not punishment. Flag and assist, never isolate, employees showing 2 or more archetype indicators. 4. Address disenchantment at scale. Run the anonymous survey in Chapter 9 within 30 days. Tie leadership incentives to measurable reductions in workload complaints, mission cynicism, and recognition gaps. Resolve grievances visibly and quickly. 5. Profile every new external contact. Train receptionists, conference attendees, and IT staff to log and escalate any outsider who offers unsolicited help, projects undue authority, or references others like you. Treat these as potential RASCLS probes under the Chapter 5 cycle. Longer-term institutional hardening. Embed the manual's frameworks into policy. Update vetting, training, and access control standards. Create a standing human firewall team, security plus HR plus ethics, that meets monthly to review emerging threats and adjust archetype interventions. Measure resilience annually. Track inside incident rates, disenchantment scores, and interrupted recruitment attempts. Stay current, review the recommended sources in Appendix D, and update your AI detection capabilities as tools evolve. The operatives of tomorrow will be faster, smarter, and more numerous because of AI and non-state proliferation. Your institution does not need to match their technology, it needs to match their understanding of human nature. By making personality awareness part of your culture, you turn the greatest vulnerability into the greatest strength. This manual was written as a practical guide, not a theoretical treatise. Use it, share it, adapt it. The shadows within are real, but they are not inevitable. With awareness, vigilance, and ethical resolve, institutions can remain strong, trustworthy, and resilient for the people they serve. The final word belongs to you. The recruitment cycle can be interrupted. The archetypes can be supported rather than exploited. The future of your institution is not determined by the sophistication of the threat, it is determined by the depth of your awareness. Appendices. A quick reference, MICE vs. RASCLS comparison. Aspect MICE traditional, RASCLS modern. Core focus exploits weakness, need, fear, greed, builds voluntary commitment. Primary driver, push-pull based on deficits, engineered alignment, through universal psychology. Typical timeline, fast initial recruitment, high burnout, slower start, decades-long productivity. Agent reliability, often low, resentment, minimization, high self-image alignment. Handler view of asset, negative, venal, weak, fanatic, positive, partner, valued contributor. Key principles, money, ideology, compromise, ego, reciprocation, authority, scarcity, commitment, consistency, liking, social proof. Best for walk-ins, high coercion scenarios, long-term, low coercion, modern hybrid operations. Defensive counter, address surface needs, quickly interrupt sequence at every phase, Chapter 5. B. Archetype summary table with red flags and interventions. Full table from Chapter 2, expanded with Chapter 9 interventions and checklists for quick reference. Archetype primary traits/amplifiers, top red flags, key RASCLS hooks, recommended interventions. Overworked gatekeeper, high C, high N workload complaints, external help acceptance reciprocation, liking workload rotation, internal automation first. Disillusioned idealist, high O, high A cynicism, external advocacy authority, social proof mission forums, fast internal whistleblower. Ambition sink, high EO, narcissism competitor networking, bitterness scarcity authority transparent promotions, internal stretch assignments. Disgruntled survivor, high N, chronic disgruntlement passive aggression, long tenure grievances reciprocation, liking mentor pairing, visible grievance resolution. Entitled independent Machiavellianism, narcissism policy exceptions, side ventures authority, scarcity uniform enforcement, ethics refreshers. thrill-seeking opportunist psychopathy, thrill-seeking risky hobbies, spy media interest scarcity, liking authorized red team exercises. Isolated insider high N, low EA withdrawal, oversharing liking, reciprocation EAP outreach buddy systems. Debt-drowned pragmatist transactional, financial stress lifestyle salary mismatch, reciprocation, cash, confidential financial counseling. Invisible essential high C, wounded vanity, nobody sees me, comments authority, liking mandatory recognition programs. Ethical rogue high O, sadism entitlement moral crusades, document hoarding social proof, authority strong internal ethics hotlines. Entitled legacy narcissism Machiavellianism, I built this, resistance scarcity authority succession IP agreements, retention incentives. Complacent passenger low C, low N policy violations, it's fine attitude any low effort hook security simulations, task automation. C. Behavioral observation checklist for insider risks. Use this checklist during routine interactions or performance reviews. Check any box that applies and escalate if two or more are present. Sudden lifestyle changes inconsistent with salary. New external mentor or helpful contact. Defensive protection of an outsider relationship. References to others doing the same. Justification of small policy exceptions by prior small favors. Increased cynicism or moral language about the institution. Withdrawal from team events or sudden oversharing. Requests for urgent same-day approvals from outsiders. Stockpiling or unusual copying of documents. Repeated security violations with minimal concern. D. Recommended sources. Burkitt Randy, From Mice to RASCLS, Studies in Intelligence 2013. Cialdini Robert B. Influence, The Psychology of Persuasion. CERT Insider Threat Center, CMU Reports, 2020-2025. CISA Insider Threat Guidance and Case Studies. Furnham and Taylor, The Psychology of Spying. Declassified CIA FBI Analyses of Ames, Hanson Montes, Cambridge 5. Annual State of Insider Threat, Reports from DTEX, Proofpoint and Verizon DBIR. These sources remain the foundation for ongoing study. Update them regularly as new declassified materials and threat reports emerge.